Hello, everyone. Do not forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment the word cell phone. The anime begins by asking us a very interesting question about what will happen to your social network after you pass away. At first, anyone would think that you simply would not publish anything anymore. However, perhaps it is not quite like that. There might be something much deeper behind it. After that, we meet our protagonist named Soji. He is a provocative YouTuber who dedicates himself to instigating fights, beating certain people up, and earning money at their expense. While this irritates everyone, he becomes fascinated and delighted, because every time he sees people's hate comments, he simply gets excited, because according to him, the more they hate him, the more money he earns. On the train, he can hear how his name is on everyone's lips, while the views on his channel only continue to increase. His last published video showed him beating up an MMA YouTuber. Afterward, he ran away from the scene. Even though some people hate him and detest him, they cannot stop watching him. He seems like a tough and very combative boy, but when he is in front of his sister, he is very different. Upon finding her at the hospital, he becomes very worried and asks if she can remain seated. But she asks him to calm down. His sister is named Akari, and she asks what he is doing, since he was not replying to her messages. He answers that he had a pending matter to resolve and mentions that he brought a sweet treat for her. However, Akari knows her brother perfectly well and knows that he only brought that to end up eating it all by himself. Soji asks her not to think that way, saying that the two of them could share the sweet. But his sister reminds him that he cannot eat a sweet every single day. She asks how many he has already eaten that day, and he replies that he ate 3. But she does not believe that at all, and he ends up confessing that he ate 6. She gives him a huge lecture, reminding him that he needs to maintain a balanced diet. Akari says that he is a hopeless case if she is not by his side. Soji apologizes, but she replies that precisely for that reason she is going to eat the cupcake all by herself. But unfortunately, she becomes very breathless and begins to cough. Her brother becomes worried and tries to call the nurse, but she stops him and reassures him, saying that everything is fine. Even so, she cannot understand why her body punishes her in that manner. Soji asks her to be strong, because there is only 1 month left before she travels to the United States, where the miracle doctor is going to perform her surgery. She tries to be strong, but a little worried. She asks if he is sure that he can spend so much money. Soji tells her not to worry, because he has already taken care of that and has an excellent job. Then, he remembers that old man from the orphanage, who always told him that he should live without being a nuisance to others, and that if there were an honest way to earn a lot of money, he should follow it. Unfortunately, he does not possess intellectual skills, but he has an excellent physique and a lot of talent for fighting. And if in order to earn good money he needs to be a nuisance, then he is definitely going to do that. He cares very little if the entire world hates him, as long as his sister Akari can recover. Thus a month passes, and people begin to worry, as they notice that no new video has been published on the channel. Meanwhile, others comment that he has already retired from MeTube, because his channel is now private, and that he was probably sent to the Miden Academy, an institution specialized in young people addicted to cell phones, and which according to rumors tortures them in a terrible way, to the point where nobody manages to leave that place alive. At dusk, Soji is at home eating a pudding, when suddenly he receives a message from Akari. He replies that he is doing very well and that he is eating a pudding, and Akari begins to scold him, because she knows that he should not be eating sweets. She asks him to keep his promise, and reveals that she is feeling very well, as if she had never been sick at all. She also comments that she misses him very much and wants to see him, but she will return very soon. Soji becomes emotional upon seeing that his sister is doing much better. The hours pass, and while he is sleeping, he partially opens his eyes and sees a fellow with an enormous screen about to send him to the ice sky. Soji manages to dodge the blow, but the man asks him to stop evading, calling him a scoundrel. Soji asks who he is, and the subject apologizes for having used such an offensive word. Soji asks why he is apologizing for that, instead of apologizing for almost having killed him. He continues to dodge the blows, but he ends up dropping his cell phone on the floor. The mysterious man aims at the device, but Soji picks it up and runs away. Upon arriving at the park, he informs his sister about the occurrence, and she asks what happened. Soji tells her everything, but he cannot understand why the target of that subject was precisely his cell phone. And when he was about to call the police, the man appears behind him. But Soji manages to prevent the attack. The young man is quite surprised, while Soji lunges at him, warning that now he is going to attack in self-defense. The boy manages to block his blows with great ease, Next, he uses a huge hammer to strike his cell phone. Soji manages to prevent it, but at that moment the young man calls him by his name and makes it clear that he knows perfectly well that he is Aoringo, the provocative YouTuber from MeTube. He knows his videos very well, but it is not because he wants to watch them, since he considers that content to be some of the worst possible, and says that just by seeing it he feels like vomiting. Afterward, he apologizes again for having said such offensive things. However, it is Soji who kneels and begs for forgiveness, imagining that he has finally understood what is happening. He believes that at some point he must have beaten up some relative of that young man, which is why he apologizes and confesses that he did all of that for money. So he perfectly understands why he hates him. Soji says that he was prepared for a situation like this, and asks only that he does not kill him. He can beat him as much as he wants, but he begs him to spare his life, and especially not to touch his cell phone, because his sister is very far away, and he is talking to her. Even so, the young man continues to attack the phone, and Soji asks if he happens not to hear what he is saying. He can beat him at will, but he must not touch the cell phone, but that subject replies that he has no interest at all in hurting him. All he wants to do is destroy that phone. Soji does not intend to allow this, because he needs it to talk to his sister. The young man then asks in surprise if he really does not realize what he is saying. In reality, his sister has been dead for a month. Soji is shocked and tries to say that his sister did not die, because if that is true, he wonders whom he is talking to. At that moment, we see a flashback showing that his sister's condition worsened, and before his very eyes, she ended up passing away. Soji was unable to accept that. He did not even appear at the funeral, and when he received his sister's ashes, he refused to believe that she was inside there, consumed by suffering. He spent every day eating sweets, while sending messages to his sister's cell phone, desperate and waiting for some response, until one day he noticed that his messages had been viewed, and shortly after they were answered. Upon seeing that she told him stories of their childhood, and scolded him again for eating too many sweets, he clung with all his strength to the idea that his sister was still alive, and that no one else could be using that account. No one could replace his only family. However, back in the present, Akari's voice begins to be heard through the cell phone. The device's screen distorts and displays her face while she comments to her brother that she can finally see him. Soji becomes emotional. He cannot believe how this is possible, but his sister is alive inside the phone. Taking advantage of the moment of distraction, the young man throws the cell phone away, and when it falls to the ground, he sends a powerful attack against the device. Soji panics. However, when the smoke clears, the young man is quite surprised to realize that he failed to hit it. From the cell phone emerges the figure of Akari, who thanks her brother for having protected her. She comments that without him she would not have been able to grow so much. As for Soji, he is delighted to be able to see his sister again. But suddenly everything begins to go wrong. The figure of Akari distorts and blood begins to run down her eyes. Worried, Soji asks what is happening to her, but the young man interrupts, warning that that is no longer his sister. He reveals that the one who has been talking to Soji all this time was that ghost. Next, he explains that these spirits usually appear in important places, like bathrooms, hospitals, mirrors, music rooms, and even beaches. But nowadays they are appearing more and more in cell phones. When the account of a deceased person on a social network turns into a dead account, it ends up becoming a ghost. Soji replies that this is impossible, that there is no scientific basis for this explanation. The young man answers that he is not in a position to want to rely on science right now. He wanted to destroy the cell phone before that ghost manifested itself, but Soji ended up stopping him. And now that the ghost has fully manifested, physical attacks will no longer have any effect, and it will be necessary to resort to other methods. Soji asks how he can think of using the cell phone at a time like this, but the young man answers that right now is precisely the ideal time. They are facing a digital ghost. Nothing physical produces any effect against this type of spirit, so they digitize their spiritual power in order to be able to exercise them. Soji thinks he is going crazy when he sees him pull an enormous hammer from inside his own cell phone. However, the boy is surprised to realize that Soji is able to see the hammer, which means that he possesses spiritual potential. Next, he prepares to finish off Akari's ghost, delivering a sequence of hammer strikes in every direction, while telling Soji that, no matter how much of a scoundrel he is going to save his sister so that she stops being that bizarre thing. He uses his power to strike a rain of hammer blows upon the ghost. However, Soji notices that his sister, or at least that thing, is suffering. The ghost realizes this and takes advantage of the situation, beginning to call out for her brother. In Soji's mind, the voice of his little sister echoes. Thus, when the young man is about to send the ghost to the ice sky once more, Soji stops him and begs him not to attack, saying that he is hurting Akari, and that he does not care if she is a ghost because she is still his sister. The young man becomes quite furious, grabs Soji by the shirt, and shouts that it is time to wake up. His sister died and the dead cannot return, and explains that he is not the only one going through this. All people who remain alive suffer from the loss of someone important, but even so, they need to find a way to keep on living. Unfortunately, while he argues with Soji, the ghost manages to break free from the cell phone and tries to flee. The young man tries to attack her again, but is soon surprised to see Soji approaching the ghost. He asks Akari to calm down, and she begins to stand up. The young man intervenes to try to save him, but ends up receiving Akari's blow. He curses Soji because due to his fault, he can no longer move, and furthermore, he drops his cell phone. Soji becomes frightened upon seeing what his sister did, but tries to calm her down, saying that he is there for her. However, the ghost sinks her teeth into him, while saying that now they can be together forever, because he is a hopeless case without her. Soji remembers what the young man had explained, that ghosts usually appear in places that were important to the deceased person. With this, he finally understands that his sister is unable to die because he is the one keeping her trapped in that place. He concludes that his sister believed she could not die and leave him alone, feeling responsible for him. In reality, she cannot move on precisely because Soji is preventing her. He also recalls the words of the young man, who had said that he was not the only one suffering, but that everyone needed to do what was necessary to keep on living. At that instant, his cell phone begins to glow, and Akari lets go of him, while Soji reaches his hand out toward his phone, igniting a digital blue flame. The young man is quite impressed when he notices that Soji awakened his power at the last instant. But what draws his attention the most are those blue flames. Soji tells his sister that she has already died, and that she cannot continue to remain in that world. He admits that he is a hopeless case, but promises that from now on he will only eat one sweet per day. Akari's ghost becomes very furious and charges at him, screaming that he is going to stay with her forever. However, Soji replies that the time has come for her to rest, because he will manage to move forward alone. Soji delivers a blow filled with blue flames, managing to exorcise his sister's ghost. Before disappearing, Akari speaks with her true voice once again and says goodbye to her brother, while Soji can do nothing else but mourn her departure. Some time later, the team of the black-haired young man, whose name is Kasabata, gets frightened thinking that he died. However, he replies that he is still alive. The other members of the team begin to argue with him, saying that the ghost belonged to a recently created account and that he should have defeated it with great ease. Therefore, they find it quite disappointing that he allowed that poor boy to have to exorcise his own sister. Kasabata feels offended by the criticism, but reveals that that boy possesses an incendiary spiritual power. The rest of the team laments upon discovering that it is an offensive type power, and that, furthermore, it is not such a rare ability. However, Kasabata reveals that his flames are blue. This information takes the entire team by surprise. Some begin to wonder what they are going to do with them, while the team master warns that they are going to take him to the Miden Academy, and that once they get there, it will depend solely on him to learn or die. Thus, time passes. Soji awakens in an inn, wondering if everything he experienced was nothing more than a dream, but Kasabata quickly takes care of bringing him back to reality. Soji asks who he is, and if by any chance he brought him to that motel to take advantage of him. The young man tells him to stop talking nonsense. Now a bit more serious, Soji asks what happened to his little sister. Kasabata then throws a cell phone at him. Soji accesses his sister's social network and is quite surprised when he discovers that that account simply does not exist anymore. Kasabata explains that dead accounts turn into ghosts and that once those ghosts are exorcised, the accounts disappear. Even if by force, Soji understands that his sister has truly departed. The illness took her away, and now it is time to move forward. He promised his sister that he would manage to take care of himself, and the moment has arrived to put his life in order. But Kasabata warns that he had better stop pretending that everything is fine, as it is obvious that what happened was painful. Soji recalls that he was the very one who said it was necessary to do what was required to keep on living. At that moment, Kasabata introduces himself formally and requests that Soji call him by his last name. Next, he orders him to accompany him so he can show him the bathroom. This is quite suspicious, but here we go. While they walk, Soji notices that that inn seems very expensive. But Kasabata explains that that is not an inn. In reality, they are at the Miden Academy, a school for exorcists. Soji is quite surprised, because the room in which he woke up really looked like that of an inn. Kasabata repeats that it is an academy and explains that the room where they were was his. Since the academy functions as a boarding school, they chose that style of decoration because they believe that this way they managed to ward off bad luck. On the other hand, we see a group of students. Some feel sorry for Kasabata, while others not so much because that idiot is also quite conceited. They say that the one accompanying him is Aoringo, the provocative Metaber, a global idiot. This girl named Kasabata thinks Soji is quite handsome, but her heart belongs to Kasabata. The boy with light blue hair observes him and calls him a rotten apple. On the other hand, little Renri comments that she is very excited because she is subscribed to his channel. But this boy named Yurusagawa wants absolutely nothing to do with him. The girl with purple hair named Hasami is not interested in him, but thinks it is disgusting that he has the same power as the teacher. Anri wonders why Professor Inishiro would want someone like him. Returning to Soji, he asks Kasabata where they are, and they reply that they are in a hot spring inn, making Soji respond that then they really are in an inn, and this ends up being confirmed, because the place also possesses shops, a restroom, and some thermal water. Upon entering the water, Soji notices that his wound is already healed, and suddenly Professor Inishiro appears before them. Kasabata argues with him for having stood up suddenly, as this can cause vacillation, which can leave him quite dizzy. And now he is quite dizzy. He introduces himself to Soji. Some time later, when he leaves the bath, Kasabata mentions that he has already shown him the whole place. But Inishiro asks him to raise his spirits, and not make it seem as if he were being punished, but he views it as a true torture, since he wants to have absolutely nothing to do with the provocateur. At that moment, Inishiro approaches Soji and asks him to become an exorcist. After giving him a wink, the two of them begin to laugh. Kasabata asks what he is doing, and Inishiro answers that Soji awakened his spiritual power, and that the best thing is for him to become an exorcist. Soji cannot understand that, but Inishiro begins to explain that the problem of exorcists has existed for several millennia, waging fierce battles against evil spirits. The exorcists developed techniques to release spiritual power, but suddenly a few decades ago a great revolution happened, and the world of ghosts became digital. However, while Inishiro is giving this whole explanation, Soji is only preparing himself to leave. Thus, the whole story that he was telling with such excitement goes away. Soji simply hits the road and leaves him talking to himself, while he looks for a way to return home. Inishiro asks him not to be so cruel to him, and asks if by any chance he does not want to know more about this story. But Soji apologizes and says that he is not interested in the slightest, because he no longer wants to get involved with this whole story of ghosts, exorcists, and much less with this so-called spiritual power. He is only interested in leaving exorcism and provocations in the past, getting a normal job, eating one sweet per day, and being able to sleep. That is the life he aims for, because before the only thing he had in mind was to help his sister. But now that he lost her, he finds himself empty. But things are the way they are, so he prepares to buy a little sweet and hit the road from that place. However, Inishiro asks if he really intends to leave like this, without even discovering what happened to his sister. This catches Soji's attention, while Inishiro comments that his sister did not die because of the illness. Next, he reveals that she was murdered by a powerful ghost account, explaining that this account chooses and kills those who have strong connections to that world, and that all of its victims shed tears of blood before dying. Soji becomes very angry and asks where this ghost is, because he intends to find that idiot and kill him with his own hands. But Inishiro, very calmly, replies that he cannot do that because he is too weak. Soji gets irritated and lunges at him, but Kasabata steps in, saying that even though his teacher looks like an idiot, he is still his teacher. Inishiro asks Soji not to mistreat him. Next, he proposes a deal. If he manages to knock down Kasabata, he will recognize his strength and will tell him everything he knows. Kasabata wastes no time and invokes his digital hammer, getting excited to finally be able to beat up that imbecile. However, Soji charges toward Inishiro, who runs away while shouting that the agreement was to defeat Kasabata. Soji replies that he has no time to lose because he lost someone important. At that moment, Kasabata strikes him with his hammer, commenting that his losses do not make him special, as many people in that place have similar stories. Kasabata says that it felt very good to hit him, and to provoke Soji's fury even further, comments that it was even better than hitting his sister. The provocation works, so Soji tells Inashiro that he better tell him everything as soon as he destroys that imbecile. The students notice the conflict, and some comment that the blue-haired boy is quite famous. The teacher asks Inashiro to please take them to the training area, but he replies that he will do this because he wants everyone to pay attention. While Urusagawa finds it quite disgusting to see a boy with a hammer fighting against a provocateur, the little fan of Soji tells her not to be silly, because seeing Aoringo fight in person is not something that happens every day. Hasumi recognizes that Soji is very strong for being able to keep up with Kasabata's pace. Even so, Soji begins to be at a disadvantage. At that moment, the teacher Nanzu asks Kakiko what is happening. She explains the whole situation, but at that instant, the principal also appears. Nanzu asks the teacher to put an end to it, because he has already read the reports about that boy, and they need to remove him from that place. But the principal tells him to shut up with just a simple gesture. Meanwhile, Kasabata makes it clear to Soji that he is going to have fun by giving a beating to an idiot provocateur like him. Soji replies that he already said he did not do that for pleasure. He needed the money to be able to save his little sister. The rest of the students understand the reason why he did that, and Hasumi comments that she also has a little brother and can understand him. Even so, Kasabata comments that this sick sister excuse is very convenient. His companions think he is exaggerating, while he lands another hammer blow on Soji, saying that there are many other ways to earn money. Therefore, it would be better to admit once and for all that he liked doing that and loved drawing attention. Furthermore, those blue flames only make him even more irritated. After beating him with a rain of hammer strikes, Kasabata still apologizes for having said ugly things. Inashiro approaches Soji and comments that that is spiritual power, but it does not matter that he fights too, as he will not be able to do anything while he is unarmed. He reminds him that he must use his spiritual power through his catalyst, which means his cell phone. Next, he explains how to do this, and upon following his instructions, Soji manages to release his blue flame, surprising everyone present. Since those blue flames are very rare, Nanzu appears to be furious upon seeing those flames, while Inashiro reminds Kasabata that he must not touch them. Soji asks why everyone is looking at him that way, wanting to know if that is something dangerous. Inashiro replies that it can be said that they know someone with a similar power, and next asks him to show what those flames are capable of. Soji sends the flames to his legs, and in just an instant starts to move at a very high speed, but remains in the same position. He wonders why the flames ended up in his legs, but soon notices that thanks to this he already knows what he must do. By applying the flames again to his feet, his speed increases once more. He continues using the flames while running to prevent them from going out. Inashiro thinks that that incendiary ability matches Soji perfectly, while Soji himself charges for the attack with all his strength. Kasabata manages to dodge, but the grazing blow cuts his face. He becomes furious and goes for the counterattack. Meanwhile, the students cannot believe that Soji only awakened his power the day before. As for Hasumi, she begins to worry, because Kasabata is starting to lose control. Soji tries to give a beating to Kasabata, while we see that Nanzu remains quite nervous. Kakiko asks Inashiro to put an end to that fight already, and he complies with the request because he has already seen everything he wanted. However, Kasabata refuses to stop, and calls him a stupid virgin, making Inashiro look dejected, since he is a monk and took a vow of chastity. Soji is excited because he believes that with that power, nobody will be able to defeat him, but at that moment Kasabata's hammer becomes much larger, and with a single hammer strike destroys the ground. Soji manages to dodge, but is impressed by the size of that thing, realizing that Kasabata is truly very strong, and that he is still quite weak. And when Kasabata was about to send Soji to the ice sky, Inashiro interrupts and argues with him, warning that he went over the line. He was too brutal both physically and verbally. Soji is left unable to believe it, when he sees Inashiro block that huge hammer with just one hand, and realizes that everyone there is incredible. At that moment Inashiro apologizes, and tells that if they had defeated that ghost before, his sister would still be alive. He also admits that he used this to provoke him, and make him angry so that he would awaken his spiritual power, and he could see it in action. However, Soji interrupts and he apologizes, saying that now he wants to enroll and become an exorcist, or whatever he wants him to be, but that he needs to get stronger, and wants to become stronger than anyone else. Inashiro observes him emotionally, because that determination is much better than the fake smile he used to have before. Soji makes it clear that he wants to get stronger to finish off his sister's murderer. Inashiro smiles and welcomes him to the academy, and also hands him a manual, Everyone is surprised by the great spectacle that Soji provided, but we see that Nanzu cannot accept that there exists among the students someone with the skill of the will-o'-the-wisp, and soon they hand the bill for the renovations to Inishiro, since he was the one responsible. After that, we see a group of exorcists looking for a ghost. However, the GPS is not giving a very good signal. At that moment, they find the corpse, and upon detecting his cell phone, several hands begin to emerge. The exorcists go on alert, but upon scanning the target and discovering who it is, they try to flee. But the ghost exterminates everyone, in the same brutal way that Akari died. Next, we discover that that was a recording. Endi Inishiro explains to Soji that ghost is named Solitary K. Nobody knows who he was when he was still alive, but he is the most powerful enemy of the Exorcist Association, and also the same ghost account that murdered his sister. Soji is quite surprised, because he possesses the same will-o'-the-wisp, meaning the demonic flame, an overpowered flame that drains the person's life upon contact. Soji notices that all the victims have tears of blood, just like his sister, and asks Inishiro why he possesses the same power as the subject who killed his sister, and furthermore spent the whole time fighting against Kasabata using that dangerous thing. Inishiro replies that it was pure luck nobody died. Soji gets a confused head and comments that he is going to return home to organize his thoughts. But at that time the class appears before him, and Kasabata says that he is not going anywhere. Inishiro comments that they are his students and his future companions, so he hopes everyone gets along well. But Kasabata begins to provoke him, asking if he has already realized what kind of freak he is, and saying that nobody would like to work alongside someone whose flames could kill him. The most regrettable thing is that they cannot lose sight of him either, so he wonders what sin he is paying for. But at that time Urisugawa interrupts and pulls Kasabata off him, introducing herself to Soji and asking for forgiveness for Kasabata's attitude. Soji asks if he can also call him by his name, but Kasabata makes it clear that he better not even try. Right after, Renri introduces herself and comments that Kasabata is only irritated because he took a beating. Soji is surprised to see that the doll is speaking, and Renri mentions that she does gaming live streams, so they should do a collaboration someday. Urisugawa asks for everyone to take a photo, while the others cannot believe that they are treating a user of the will-o'-the-wisp with such naturalness. Inishiro comments that the time has come for the first test. Next, Soji already appears wearing his uniform. Inishiro explains that they are going to use that machine to test his spiritual power, and that if he passes he will be sent to field exorcism missions, which means he will be able to face Solitary K at any moment. This motivates Soji, who thinks about doing whatever is necessary to finish off that idiot ghost. Inishiro activates the machine, and from it emerge two muscular spirits called Yuyumomi. The condition to pass is to defeat 100 of them, but Inishiro recommends that he not underestimate them. Soji springs into action and defeats two. However, he soon begins to stagger. Inishiro warns that the test ends there, explaining that when Soji releases his virtual power, the cell phone's battery synchronizes with his spiritual power. In other words, he ran out of battery, or better said, spiritual power. Sometime later, while they are eating, Inishiro explains that that is an endurance test, and that defeating 100 of those spirits is not going to be easy at all. Urisugawa reminds that Soji had already spent spiritual power during the fight against Kasabata, and Inishiro reveals that his sole objective was to make him experience the sensation of running out of battery. Soji understands, but changes the subject, commenting that that place seems much more like an inn than an academy. He is surprised to notice that it is already night, and Inishiro asks him to calm down. Next, he explains that when he runs out of battery, he simply shuts down for about 5 hours, and do whatever you want with him, and he will not react during all that time. Inishiro even makes it clear that if this happens during a field mission, he will be practically dead. Soji feels like a true failure, since before he thought everything would be very easy. Inishiro laughs and comments that that is just a demonstration of the strength of his spiritual power, as the real test will take place within a week, and he will have only a single opportunity. In case he does not pass, he will be locked up and subjected to various torture. Furthermore, the academy is quite divided, because many people believe that he is an accomplice of Solitary K. After all, that will-o'-the-wisp killed many people, which means that Soji is going to have many enemies in that place. Inishiro recommends that he eat well and sleep plenty, because that is the best way to recover his spiritual power. Some time later, when he finishes eating, Soji asks where his room is, but Kasabata tells him to stop talking nonsense, because he had already said that he cannot lose sight of him, meaning Soji is going to stay in the same room as him without discussion. Kasubata begins to provoke him and insult him, but Soji only stares at him with a look full of determination. Upon realizing this, Kasubata wonders if he is thinking about why he must stay with him, making it clear that he also thinks exactly the same thing. But out of nowhere, Soji asks Kasubata to train him, so that he can manage to learn to control his spiritual power in that single week. Kasubata is left with no reaction, and asks how he can ask for something like that precisely from the one who just gave him a beating. Soji replies that his pride does not matter. He is weak and needs to get stronger. Kasubata then reveals that either way he was already going to train him, because Professor Inishiro had made that request to him. Upon hearing this, Soji gives thanks all excited. At that moment, we see a flashback in which Inishiro asks Kasubata to train Soji, explaining that as the class representative, that is also his responsibility. Kasubata had refused because he hates users of incendiary abilities. Even so, Inishiro insisted, because he believed that that would be the best not only for Soji, but also for Kasubata himself. After those words, he finally accepts, and while he observes Soji, he thinks that users of incendiary abilities are all the same. When it is time to sleep, Soji begins to complain because he cannot fall asleep, and furthermore he already slept 5 hours during the afternoon. Kasubata just tells him to shut his mouth and go to sleep. The next day, they begin training, where Kasubata explains to Soji that he needs to control the flow of his spiritual power, since he is overflowing too much, and for that reason his battery runs out very quickly. He explains that spiritual power is influenced by the mental state. Therefore, he recommends that he imagine something that helps him contain it. He must find a unique image that helps him control this power, and as soon as he manages, that control will improve. After an instant, Soji runs out of battery, but manages to defeat 35 opponents. On the second day, the training continues, and Hasumi and the others curiously go to watch his training. While they observe, they believe that that might be impossible, since Soji just awakened his spiritual power, and Urusagawa took at least 6 months to overcome this test. Soji runs out of battery again, and this time defeats only 31 opponents. Thus arrives the third day, and he begins to eat a lot of sweets and drink all kinds of energy drinks. But that serves absolutely no purpose, and do not do that, children. On the fourth day, he begins to refine his technique with more efficient movements, defeating 49 opponents. His companions begin to note his evolution, but on the sixth day he barely manages to defeat 44 enemies, and remains frustrated for not being able to find that unique image. The boys lament because Soji is in trouble, and upon waking up he enters a panic upon realizing that he no longer has any time left. Meanwhile, Kasubata argues with him, saying that he is focused too much on the superficial part of the image when it should be something tangible capable of running through his entire body. Even so, Soji puts the worry aside and prefers to eat some cupcakes. Kasubata asks if he really thinks they are not going to do anything against him, making it clear that that is not just a threat. The people in that place are dying to dissect him alive, and do not intend to leave even his bones behind. When Soji hears the word bones, he asks Kasubata if he could return home for a moment. Kasubata thinks to himself that he already knew that users of incendiary abilities were pure worthlessness, living only for the emotion of the moment. But Soji explains that he just remembered that the commemorative photo and Akari's urn remained at home. When he heard the word bones, he remembered that he never locked the door, and that some degenerate might enter there and steal them. Kasubata asks if he still has not understood that he could be killed the next day, or if that was just an excuse to run away. Soji replies that he has no reason to run away, because that is now all he has left. The night passes, and the next day everyone gathers to watch Soji's test. He does not feel that that is scary, but believes that finally everything is going to end that day. The test begins very quickly. Soji observes his battery and begins to defeat the Uemomi. Inishiro gets worried because he is releasing too large a flame. Soji has already defeated 20 opponents, and his battery is already at half. Meanwhile, Nanzu and the bald man next to him get excited, as they believe that he is never going to manage to overcome that test. After all, he awakened his power only a week ago, and to expect him to pass that test would be like expecting a newborn to start walking. His companions begin to encourage him, but when he reaches 36 enemies defeated and his battery drops to 28%, Nanzu and the bald man smile. While Kasubata begins to laugh and asks what kind of pathetic spectacle that is, he orders Soji to lose already, calling him an incendiary provocateur of trash. His companions ask what happened to him, but Kasabata's words end up encouraging everyone present, who also begin to insult Soji. The battery continues decreasing, but at that moment Soji has an epiphany and remembers the time when he was a YouTuber and received countless insults in the comment. At that time he was very afraid of provoking people, because he felt that he attracted all the hatred in the world. But when Akari began to get worse, he realized that there was nothing more terrifying than that. He needed money to save his sister, and therefore all the hatred that appeared on the screen ended up transforming into the machine that yielded him money. Now, finally, he understands what he needs to do. Soji begins to control the flow of his spiritual power, surprising everyone when he defeats the Yuyumomi one after the other. Nanzu and the bald man cannot believe what they are seeing. Inishiro observes Kasabata and comments that he did an excellent job, because by putting the entire class against Soji, he recreated an environment in which he lived as a provocateur, as that was a concrete and tangible image for him. He finally managed to find his unique image. Therefore, Inishiro believes that the two of them are going to form a quite amusing duo. However, Nanzu refuses to accept that result and invokes the Yuyumomi at their maximum potency. Even so, Soji comments that that was not enough, because he still wants to feel more anger. Upon reconnecting with the emotion he felt as a provocateur, he defeats all the Yuyumomi as if it were nothing, causing the machine itself to stop working. One of the students comments that passing the mark of 160 is a new record in the power release test. While Nanzu walks away frustrated, and Kasabata observes Soji, remembering when that shameless idiot said that he did not provoke people for pleasure. The next day, Soji is quite surprised, but he imagined that that was a school for exorcists, so he wonders why they were having a math class. Hasumi explains that the institution remains an officially recognized school, and says that if he needs help, he can ask her, adding that he can call her by her name. At that moment, Urusagawa comments that Renri only keeps telling him to study. Thus, Soji and his childhood friend began to get along better, while Soji wonders what kind of spiritual power the other students possess. Kasabata asks Soji to admit that he loves to fight because he is a crazy provocateur. At that moment, they are interrupted by Urusagawa, who comments that all people of the offensive type have a horrible personality, and that includes him too. Kasabata tells him to look at himself, saying that he is not like Soji, because Soji is evil and he is good. The boys just observe the two arguing, since that is something quite typical. At that moment, Inishiro enters the room and warns that they have a mission from the intelligence division. It is time for Soji to go on his first mission. He then wonders whom he should place on his team, remembering that exorcism is teamwork. Upon seeing Kasabata and Urusagawa arguing as usual, he feels they can form the perfect team, and announces that the three of them will go together. Meanwhile, in a sort of movie theater filled with corpses, Solitary K mourns the death of Akari, who had just awakened shortly before being eliminated. His companion Garen tries to cheer him up, since he has seen him quite depressed in recent days, and says that when one door closes, another opens. He himself recognizes that perhaps it is not quite like that, but reminds K that he should feel happy for having already found that solitary boy. K then remembers this, and decides that it is more than time to visit the user of the Will-O-the-Wisp, meaning, trouble is coming. On the other hand, our Super Saiyan arrives with his two companions at the mission site, and is quite surprised because it is a well-known electronics store called Big Camera. What catches his attention the most is seeing Inishiro greeting them in a wig and very ordinary clothes. The gentleman explains that he needed to disguise himself so as not to draw too much attention, but I believe that this outfit does not go very unnoticed. Just when he explains the situation, three girls approach him, saying that he is very handsome, and asking if the three of them could go out with him at the same time. Inishiro tries to play hard to get, saying that he is working and that he has already abandoned these worldly desires, but obviously this is nothing more than an act, since he is blatantly staring at the body of one of the girls. Afterward, the girl ends up taking Inishiro away, and Kakiko takes command. She tells the group that they detected spiritual signals at the location and that there is an injured client, indicating that it is a hub of ghost accounts. Kasabata explains to Soji that these digital ghosts need to be charged from time to time, as if they were old batteries, or they end up disappearing. Therefore, paranormal activities in electronic locations are not so uncommon. Urusagawa interrupts them, complaining about why she had to team up with those two. Kasabata admits that he did not expect it either, but apparently Inishiro likes to see them suffer. Soji also does not understand why he is involving him in such a matter, since he is just a normal boy, but Urusagawa does not care at all about that. because she has more important problem, like the fact that her idol is going to do a live stream in 2 hours, and she does not want to miss it by any means. She also confesses that she never wanted to be an exorcist. Kakiko warns that the mission is to eliminate all the ghosts, which apparently are low level. According to intelligence, there is not much risk, but she recommends that they take care not to lose their lives. After that, the group enters the location and Soji encourages them to finish everything as quickly as possible. But at the same time, he gets a little frightened by being in such a large and empty store. Urusagawa hurries them to conclude the mission and Soji tries to warn her about a ghost, but she dodges easily and activates her digital power, making a sticky and strange mass appear in her hand, and then shooting at the ghost, defeating it easily. It is disgusting, but it works and Soji becomes quite confused. Kasabata explains that Urusagawa is a stalker fan of a bassist or drummer of a band. She is the type of intense fan who reviews every publication, looks for reflections in photos, and tries to find out where the musician lives. Therefore, she keeps being banned, but that does not stop her, since she creates new accounts to keep persisting. Still, Urusagawa denies that this is something bad, saying that only in pure and sincere love. The group continues moving forward, and Kasabata tells Soji that the way each one uses their cell phone directly reflects their spiritual power. This makes Soji understand what Urusagawa meant about the personality of offensive type people. Urusagawa defeats a ghost nearby and begins to fight together with Kasabata, working in perfect coordination and eliminating several specters. Soji is surprised for not expecting such synchrony, since until recently they were fighting like cats and dogs, but now they demonstrate that they have known each other for a long time at the academy and understand each other perfectly. He realizes that exorcisms are teamwork and decides not to stay behind. Upon seeing a ghost emerging behind his companions, he charges forward to eliminate it, but the two do not thank him and even curse him, since he was the one who almost killed them with his will-o'-the-wisp. Meanwhile, in another part of the store, two thieves take advantage of the fact that the location is empty to steal everything they can, but end up being caught by ghosts at that moment. On the other hand, Urusagawa confesses to Soji that she never wanted to be an exorcist. She says that she is good at fighting and has talent, so she ended up accepting it. Furthermore, she needs a lot of money to continue supporting her idol in super chats and demonstrate all her love. Even so, all of this still seems quite strange to Soji. Kasabata tells them to concentrate and Urusagawa replies that she is always concentrated, reminding Soji that he is someone inferior. Even while arguing, they continue fighting together without problems. Urusagawa still asks Soji to get out of the way, saying that his will-o'-the-wisp is disruptive, making Soji feel bad. Thus, the group arrives at the final destination on the top floor. Urusagawa asks them to be quick so that she can manage to watch the live stream. At that moment, they encounter a ghost, and she mobilizes it for Kasabata to attack. But the ghost turns around quite excited, saying that now it has more toys to play with. This leaves Kasabata quite shocked, because the ghost regenerated with great ease and freed itself from Urusagawa's power very easily. The ghost grabs her and uses her as a new toy. Kasabata tries to attack it, but ends up receiving a direct blow, which throws him against the shelves. This worries Soji, who asks what is happening, and if those ghosts were not low-level. Kasabata reveals that that thing is not an ordinary low-level ghost, but rather a cursed ghost, which makes it a medium or high-level being. To defeat it, they would need a specialized team, and it does not come anywhere close to the group they have now. At that moment, Soji sees the ghost break Urusagawa's arm and then throw her to the ground, leaving her seriously injured. Soji panics when he realizes that that is on a different level from anything he has ever faced. Kasabata stands up and tells him to run away, saying that he is going to rescue Urusagawa. He orders Soji not to fight, because his flames only get in the way. Even so, Soji advances with his spiritual power, but it is totally useless. The ghost regenerates in an instant and begins to comment that Urusagawa would look much better with a broken neck. Soji runs to save her, and at that time the ghost is hit by a stuffed animal filled with the will-o'-the-wisp, thus freeing Urusagawa. Soji then reminds Kasabata that exorcism is teamwork, and says that he does not care if his power gets in the way or not. Kasabata recovers Urusagawa and they flee. The ghost begins to throw objects to block the exit. Meanwhile, Kakiko argues with the intelligence group for not having informed them that there was a medium-level ghost, and why is that Rascal and Ishiro not at the location? Returning to the group, they are hidden. Soji, despite being worried, tells Kasabata that he was useful. Kasubata argues with him, saying that if his fire had touched anyone, that person would have died. However, he notices something, and at that moment Soji approaches and touches his flame. Upon seeing that that is not killing him, Kasubata is quite surprised and manages to understand what is happening. The spiritual mode is governed by yin and yang. As he could notice, the ghost failed to regenerate the wound where it was hit by Soji's fire, which means that his power is the opposite of the demonic will-o'-the-wisp. Since it does not affect living beings, it only burns the souls of ghosts. In other words, Soji has friendly fire deactivated. Soji gets quite excited, since now he is no longer a danger to his companions, and asks Kasubata what the plan is. Kasubata orders him not to be so stupid, since that is a medium-level cursed ghost and they have no chance of winning. But Soji replies that there is always a chance. He smiles while the ghost gets furious over the wound caused by Soji. At that moment, Soji returns to attack it, and Kasubata takes advantage of the opening to attack exactly the same spot hit by Soji, since the area affected by the flames cannot regenerate. Now there is a chance. Even though Soji received a quite heavy blow, he stands up again. The ghost warns that it will have no mercy, and that it will transform them into a work of art using their limbs. This awakens in Soji a familiar sensation from the time when he was a provocateur. The adrenaline completely dominates him, and Kasubata smiles upon seeing that he is enjoying the situation. Meanwhile, the live stream that Urusagawa was waiting for finally begins. Returning to the group, Soji misses an attack, and upon tripping, becomes exposed to a direct blow. Kasubata tries to save him, but at that time, Urusagawa's sticky mass appears again to enter the battle. She is very furious, because she lost her streak of being the first to send a super chat, and orders the two to attack that thing that made her miss the live stream. The ghost becomes trapped in her power, and the group takes advantage to attack with everything. They attack in sequence, causing great damage to the creature, but it is about to free itself. At that time, Urusagawa's idol thanks the first person who sent the super chat in the direct message, and she comments that next time she will buy front row tickets. This makes Urusagawa revolt, asking who that idiot is that thinks of getting close to her little baby. Her emotions explode, releasing even more power, which tightens around the ghost forcefully. Soji is highly amused, and comments that she has a personality that is even worse than theirs. He attacks the ghost, and says that they are three idiots together, who by combining their powers will finally defeat that creature. Meanwhile, at the Exorcist base, we see how the two are arguing, because the intelligence failed, and they are going to have to send the second-year students to save those of the first year. But at this time we see how he smiles, implying that perhaps he had something to do with the incorrect information. Returning to the group, the ghost disappears. Kiyomi falls exhausted, while Soji shouts with excitement, and Kasubata asks him to accept it once and for all. He always apologized to his sister, but deep down he knows he is no longer useless. And in the end, Soji accepts that yes, he is trash. But Kasubata says that even from trash a great exorcist can emerge. On the other hand, Kiyomi cheers him up in her own way, and the boys get excited, since they managed to overcome their first mission together, and now they are officially the worst possible trio. But they work. Kasubata warns Soji that from now on they are going to start training together, and they begin to charge forward excitedly. However, we see that among the rubble of the location, digital particles begin to appear. Soji notices a voice that is mourning, and upon turning around to ask his companions why they are sad, he notices that they fall to the ground with bleeding eyes, and Solitary K begins to emerge from a screen, lamenting having lost another dead account. Soji is left breathless and finds it increasingly difficult to breathe. Rage consumes him. While his companions fall to the ground, he is blinded by anger, digitalizing his flames and charging at Solitary, connecting a great quantity of blows, which did not produce any effect. Solitary laments and asks if by any chance that is the best he can do. Soji is quite impressed to see that he caused no damage, and suddenly his eyes fill with blood, and he falls to the ground. Soji wonders why this ghost knows his name and why it appeared there out of nowhere. Furthermore, he does not understand having the same power, but now none of that matters, and he tries to move to take revenge on his sister's murderer. Solitary asks if by any chance he refers to Akari from the hospital, because if it is her, he is very sad because he exerted too much effort to be able to kill her, and he made her death be in vain. His words leave Soji very angry, who tries to move his body while having memories of his dear sister, while Solitary notices that his sister's death links him to this world, and if he kills him he will be able to be reborn as a ghost. Therefore he extends his flames to attack Soji. However, when he does that, his attack is interrupted, and from the battlefield Inishiro joins them. Solitary asks who he is, and he introduces himself as the teacher of these boys. Soon they find themselves together with Kiyomi and Kasabata, and Solitary notices that this teacher is quite fast. Soji worries about his companions, but Inishiro tells him that he must not worry because they are still alive. And then he begins to cry, asking for their forgiveness, since those women would not let him go, and because of that they had to face a medium-level specter, while he was completely relaxed at the karaoke with the women. Then Solitary returns to attack them, but they are protected by a barrier. Soji does not understand anything, but Kasabata explains that this is a barrier that prevents the intrusion of chronic entities for 3 minutes. The detail is that it can be broken if a physical object crosses it. It is a barrier that prevents ghosts from attacking. Inishiro asks the boys not to move from that place, and congratulates Soji because he did an excellent job, while he feels that he was only useless. But Inishiro says that he did not give up and always kept his head high, which means that he did not lose, and now it is time for him to take care of the rest. He invokes his spiritual power, and from his fan emerges an enormous carp, which attacks Solitary and warns that fire cannot be used in closed environment. So the best thing is to extinguish it. Soji is surprised to see how powerful his teacher is, and asks the boys what type of virtual power is Inishiro's. However, Kasabata reveals that Professor Inishiro cannot utilize virtual power. In other words, he is utilizing his spiritual power through a converter device, and his fan was designed for that, revealing that the majority of veterans with developed spiritual power do the same, because it is not easy at all for analog people to face virtual ghosts. For that same reason, the Miden Academy exists to create a new generation of exorcists. He is just an old man, but their future is extraordinary. Their power begins to collide, but Inishiro's eyes begin to fill with blood, because when an analog exorcist virtualizes their spiritual power, the result is only 10% of his original power. Soji becomes quite worried, but Kasabata asks him to calm down because that guy's spiritual power was already broken, and despite being heavily nerfed, it continues to be absurd. Inishiro attacks Solitary with the tricolor glowing carp, leaving Soji surprised, while Kasabata tells him that Inishiro is the genius exorcist who at 18 years old exorcised a Janaki, a calamity-level creature, which gave him the nickname of Living Legend. However, he out of nowhere retired from the activity and refused to become the leader of the association in order to form the next generation. And as much as their teacher is very annoying, it is very difficult to imagine him losing, while Inishiro thinks that it is quite detestable getting old. But before the new generation he cannot embarrass himself. Without losing time, he advances once more against Solitary. However, he disappears, and now we see that he finds himself in the network and asks Garen why he placed him forcefully there. He recalls that he had said that he only wanted to say hello, and furthermore he was running out of battery. Solitary understands why he was having so much difficulty moving, and complains because a ghost account cannot stay long in the real world. But Garen replies that this problem is only a matter of time before being resolved, as soon as the land of dead accounts is complete. Meanwhile, Inishiro makes it clear to the boys that Solitary was in power-saving mode, and because of that he returned to the network. Kasabata gets frustrated, since that was the best time to exorcise him, while Soji cannot believe that even in power-saving mode, that Ghost managed to cause so much damage. But Inishiro asks them not to be sad, because the important thing is that they are still alive. Soji is moved and tells his teacher that now he has a new objective, which is to be like him. Meanwhile, at the academy, all the teachers are gathered, talking about how Solitary's account increasingly gains new followers, and this is due to the fact that the urban legend always attracts new followers, an account that causes it so that if you follow it, you die and 1% turn into a spirit. One of the teachers says that these things would not happen if it were not for the plague of social networks, but the principal tells everyone to be silent. While they are in the footbath, she asks Inishiro why Solitary appeared on a first-year mission. Inishiro simply ignores the question and answers asking if he can get out of the bath, because his feet are already getting wrinkled. She replies that only the people who are in the footbath can speak, but Inishiro only provokes her, saying that when she gets angry one can see the wrinkles. The rest of the teachers hold her back, while others think that this is the rascal Inishiro, the only one capable of speaking that way with the principal. He finally answers the question, saying that if Solitary appeared it might be because of Soji, since apparently he is interested in him because he has the same power. And from what he could notice in the battle, he wants to kill Soji to transform him into a ghost account. The rest of the teachers become very afraid, and Nanzu begins to say that the best option is to kill Soji and exorcise his spirit, as well as incinerate his body. But Inishiro asks him to stop with this subject, because now Soji is his student, and he will be the one to take care of everything. Afterward, he makes it very clear to everyone that he is irritated, and asks the intelligence leader if they already knew there was a medium-level ghost in that place. One of the teachers, a bit nervous, asks him to stop making it seem as if they were the ones responsible, and apologizes for having passed the wrong information. But yes, he knew. Nanzu just observes. Inishiro turns to look at him, then announces to everyone that Soji's flames are harmless to humans, meaning they cause no damage at all. Furthermore, the fact that he almost died demonstrates that he is not a spy, so if they tried to kill him now, it would simply be murder. Some try to complain, but the principal orders silence, because now that they accepted Soji as a student, they must also protect him. However, she comments that Nanzu is also right about something. They still do not know what Solitary K is planning. Therefore, if the situation gets out of control, she asks Inishiro what he intends to do, and he answers what they are going to do if that happens, but we still do not know. On the other hand, Soji comments to Kasabata that Professor Inishiro is incredible. Kasabata asks him to stop with this subject, but he does not want to stop recalling all the things he did, which were on another level. The boys continue moving forward, and we see how the rest of the upper year students just observe them and comment that it is quite despicable the fact that they failed to defeat him. But others mention that it is already impressive that they defeated a medium-level ghost. Opinions vary quite a bit, but they plan to demonstrate who is superior. At that time, Soji opens a door without knocking, and almost comes face to face with a semi-naked Urusagawa, but he does not pay attention to that. Instead, he is surprised to see that she is as good as new, so he asks if she is really Urusagawa, and she gives him a slap warning that she is just without makeup. At that time, the nurse Minako Kochi appears. Soji replies that it is a pleasure, but Minako mentions that they had already met when he arrived unconscious. She takes a photo of him and uses her spiritual power to heal his external wounds. Soji is quite surprised, but Minako says she is a bit tired because she also had to do some touch-ups on Urusagawa. Soji understands that this uses a lot of spiritual power, and Minako reveals that besides healing them, it also helps the principal treat her wrinkles. It is explained why the principal does not look 65 years old. Soji asks if her power is only for touch-ups, and Minako confirms, saying that she cannot heal internal things like diseases. But Soji remembers that Urusagawa had a broken arm. Minako asks if he wants to know how she did that. He becomes a little worried, but she reveals that she works like an anesthesia, so she opened her arm and exposed the bone. Afterward, she used her power to touch it up and finally touched up the incision. And Urusagawa is very grateful, while Minako tells him that she will heal them whenever it is necessary, even though it hurts a lot when she cannot do it. Meaning, when they go to the ice sky, Soji understands why she sacrifices herself, and says that she can take a photo of his entire wonderful body without clothes if necessary, and Minako gets excited, commenting that everything is for medical purposes, and that since she is a professional she will later delete all the photos. After that, the rest of the boys gather with them, and one of them comments to Soji that he found out that his flames cause no damage to humans, so he suggests that he should not be acting so full of himself. But when he sees Soji's angry face, he apologizes and says that the conceited one was him. However, Kasubata as well as Urusagawa and Soji begin to move. Minako asks where they think they are going, and the boys reply that it is time to train. Urusagawa is very angry because even though she does not want to be an exorcist, she gets irritated that they took a beating. Meanwhile, Soji thinks that the idiot who murdered his sister was right in front of him, and he was unable to do anything. But next time he does not intend to let him escape. Minako just observes them and comments that youth is beautiful. She does not want to be mean, but invites them to look at their cell phones, and upon doing that they realize that they are discharged, so she recommends that they go rest because rest is also part of the training. Soji gets irritated, but understands that she is right, but his group does not intend to stop, and if they cannot train their spiritual power, they are going to train their muscles. Meanwhile, we see Inishiro observing everything, and remembering the moment when they asked him what he would do if things got out of control, and he replied that he himself would kill him, But that is not going to happen because this academy needs Soji and also the class, which he knows will strive very hard to get stronger. Sometime later, Soji gathers with Kasubata and Renri to ask them to help him train, since in the last fight he realized that his physical abilities fall way below all the rest. He is sure that if he manages to improve this aspect, he will no longer be destroyed in every battle, something that would only happen if they fought with everything they have. It is a quite intelligent request, but Kasubata simply ignores him. Renri asks him to have patience, since Kasubata is in one of his daily routines. It is the most important of the day and Soji becomes quite confused. When he takes a peek at what Kasubata is doing, he is impressed to see that he is fighting against internet trolls. Anyone would say that he is wasting time and getting irritated for nothing. But according to Kasubata, he is educating the users. Soji thinks that that thing is a waste of time. After a while, when Kasubata finally finishes his daily anti-stress routine, Soji asks a curious question, wanting to know if he ever belonged to a gang. Kasubata is caught by surprise and asks why he thinks that, since the fact that he has a tattoo does not make him a criminal. But Renri interrupts and reveals that yes, he has already been in a gang, and shows a photo of how Kasubata was at that time. Soji becomes curious, and now wants to know more about his companions and everyone in that academy. Renri gets excited and says that he can ask whatever he wants. However, she also comments that if what he wants is to improve his physique, there is someone much more qualified to teach him, and sends him to the academy store to meet with Renri. The problem is that upon arriving there, Soji greets her, but she does not answer, and he panics when he sees that next to her there are several dolls, thinking that Rajima probably has a multiplication ability. But out of nowhere, she slaps him to make him stop with that nonsense and explains that what he is seeing is Demi, the academy's mascot and the store's best-selling product. In other words, she tells him that that is not her original body, but rather her spiritual power that allows her to control the doll remotely, while her real body remains in the safety of her room. This makes her a master of close-quarters combat, since she does not need to worry about getting hurt. Soji asks for lessons and Rajima takes him straight to the training room. She thanks Imo for carrying a huge, heavy suit of armor. He complains and asks why they made him carry that, but Rajima ignores him and tells Soji to get ready. At first, he hesitates a little, but he begins to take a beating from Rajima. Her movements are fast and fluid, transforming the doll's light blows into an implacable force. While Imo recommends to the defeated Soji that he take the fight seriously, because Rajima is at the global top of the best esport players and manages to bring all the impossible video game movements into real life. Soji apologizes for having underestimated her, then takes out his cell phone to fight with everything. Rajima also decides to match his determination. She gets serious and links herself to a new doll, a giant armor with a baby's head, the finest creation of the Academy's artisans, the Demi technique. The second round starts very quickly, and Soji thinks that now it will be easier because she is bigger, or at least it should be that way. But it turns out to be quite different, since in a matter of seconds, Rajima sends him flying in a totally absurd way, and then finishes him off with a Street Fighter combo. Soji does not understand where she gets such absurd reflexes, and she explains that it is not enough just to fight. You have to read the opponent, taking into account every breath and movement until you internalize the rhythm of the battle. And thanks to this explanation, Soji becomes more aware of what is happening around him, instead of simply focusing on attacking. With this, the fight gradually stops being a beating and becomes a confrontation where Soji can already dodge several attacks and even block them. The difference between this Soji and the one from a few minutes ago is absurd, but Rajima comments that he still has something to learn and raises her hand, warning that a special technique is still missing. The cannon blasts Soji, who falls defeated to the ground, but he still does not think of giving up. So he stands up again, recognizing that she is much stronger than he imagined, and that it will be a great honor to be able to call her master. She replies that it had been a long time since anyone managed to block one of her blows, and the atmosphere becomes quite epic. This leaves Imo a bit uncomfortable, and afterward they go to the infirmary to treat the wounds, where the nurse recommends that they do not overdo it, since the principal is getting annoyed at not being able to do her anti-aging treatment. Soji apologizes to her. After that, when he leaves the restroom, he starts thinking about what Rajima would be like in real life, imagining that she might be that typical gamer who uses a cute female skin just to play. But he gets distracted and ends up bumping into Kiyomi, a shy girl with pink hair. At first, he does not recognize her, but when Kiyomi approaches, he realizes that it is Rajima. His first reaction is to scream, calling her master. Then he notices that, Unlike the confident attitude she has when she is in the doll, in her real body, she panics and runs away, returning shortly after with the doll and giving him a few slaps. Obviously, her personality changes when she is playing, but despite that, both versions are kind and lovely, so she musters up the courage to whisper with her physical body that she hopes to be able to face him again someday. But after that, they are summoned to a meeting with Inishiro to discuss the strategy on how to exercise that thing. The next day, he and Kakiko are on their way to the meeting when, suddenly, they are intercepted by Nanzu, who says it is best for him not to even think about including the Will-O-the-Wisp boy in the meeting. Inishiro makes it clear that this does not depend on him and comments that the principal has already recognized Soji's abilities, so he has nothing to argue about. With that, he walks away while Nanzu gets very irritated. Kakiko explains that, after the last incident, Solitary K's danger level increased, which is why the association has already carried out 2 missions to exorcise him, but they were not successful, meaning they cannot afford to fail again. For that reason, both the association and the academy are going to work together to get rid of this threat once and for all. At the moment, the intelligence group is doing everything possible to track him, using big camera's servers. In approximately 2 months, they will manage to locate him. Soji gets excited because that gives him enough time to get stronger. However, they are soon warned that first-year students are not allowed to participate in high-level missions. Kasubata comments that there are exceptions, and the first is if the student proves their worth, and the second is if their spiritual power is essential to the plan. But at the moment, nobody fits these conditions. Fortunately, Zack already expected a negative response, so he reveals that the only chance of participation is by entering the Class A versus Class B competition, a tournament that takes place every 3 months and puts the classes to compete against each other to decide which one is the best. Hejima says it is time to train, so after that the students are practicing as a team. At a certain point, Soji is saved by Emoto's power, which allows him to create barriers when he listens to music. But due to being distracted, the barrier collapses and almost everyone ends up being defeated. The group runs because Zack is not very good at teamwork, but fortunately the rest of the group does well and manages to control the situation surrounding the 3 ghosts. During the process, he realizes that Renri Hasumi's ability allows him to monitor any enemy at the same time from the photos on his cell phone, which places him in a more informative role. But this is precisely the key to the team, and thanks to him and Emoto, the offensive skills can shine. Zack observes the training very satisfied and comments that if they keep improving, they might have good chances of winning the competition. The group spends the rest of the afternoon training together, and Soji understands that he needs to train much more if he wants to keep up with their pace. Therefore, when they finish training, he informs everyone that he is going to train alone on his own. Hejima asks him not to push himself too hard, but in the end he does not listen to her and ends up training until exhaustion. He literally falls from fatigue, but fortunately he is protected by Isurugi, although perhaps it would have been better if he had not been caught. Isurugi introduces himself and comments that he also is another student of the academy, clarifying to Soji that he is quite famous, and that the 2 of them have many things in common. Soji asks if the Lonely One also killed any family member of his, but Isurugi answers nothing. Instead, he asks if that brooch is something precious to him. Soji replies that it was a birthday present he gave to his sister, and that it is a very valuable object. But when Isurugi is about to return it, he burns the brooch before his eyes, saying that he should not trust anyone so blindly, and that the only thing that he also is an incendiary instigator. The man is a sick psychopath who satisfies himself with the feelings of pain, frustration, and anger of Soji. He asks what he intends to do about it. But at that moment, Hejima interrupts and warns Soji that that fellow is a first-class instigator and also a student of Class A, the terrible opponents that they are going to have to face. Agari is the representative of Class A and fights with Isurugi for running away from training, saying that it is better to leave. But Soji does not intend to let what that idiot did slide easily and goes after him. But in a second he is neutralized. He wonders what just happened, but out of nowhere Kasubata appears, delivering a hammer blow and asking Agari not to mess with his instigator. Next, the entire Class 1B appears gathered to protect our Soji. Meanwhile, the Lonely One is with his assistant, who asks him not to be sad, since soon he will probably meet the Will-O-the-Wisp boy again. And the best is that very soon he will be able to fulfill his dream and create the land of the dead accounts. Returning to the group, Soji stands up flying with the power of his spiritual energy, and an arrogant member of class shows that he is also no small matter. Soji stands face to face with this idiot because he definitely is not going to accept being humiliated. Isurugi warns Agari that unfortunately there is nothing more to do, and the two begin to run to enter combat. Agari understands that there is nothing he can do to stop an incendiary instigator, and Kasubata agrees, because instigators are terrible. At this time, we are introduced to the members of Class 1A, Namika, and the strange one of the group, Shina the muscular one, a wealthy individual who is obsessed with Kasubata. Meanwhile, Soji almost lands a violent blow on Isurugi. He smiles and comments that if that blow had connected, it would have broken much more than bones. He digitalizes his flames, and Soji is surprised to see that he does not use the phone to summon them. When he feels that Isurugi's fire burns, he decides to dodge, while Isurugi asks him not to get angry and explains that Class A defeated Class B in the first quarter for a simple reason, basically the supremacy of their individualities. He further says that their class will never be able to defeat them because they rely on a coward, an idiot with ability, and a little doll who only knows how to cheer. To complete, he even says that their class still has an outdated teacher. Soji gets angry and tells him to shut his mouth, charging towards Isurugi. He holds his hand wrapped in flames and orders him not to mock Class 1B nor disrespect his sister's memory. Isurugi is surprised to see that he is holding his flames with his bare hand and comments that it leaves him enchanted. The entire forest is cut down by Agari, who says that is enough and apologizes to Class 1B for Isurugi's actions, making it clear that despite everything, they are terrible. Kasubata asks if he is being compassionate, and Agari asks them not to draw the wrong conclusions. He does not say that because they are weak, but because when they accepted the Will-O-the-Wisp user, they dishonored the name of Class 1B, and states that in the combat at the end of the month, they will destroy them again. His words echo in Soji's mind, but Kasubata tells Agari that if he thinks they are going to lose because Soji is in the group, he is sorely mistaken, as it is precisely because of him that they will win this time. Out of nowhere, Isurugi begins to display a more affectionate behavior towards Soji, and says that what he feels for him is love, hoping that soon they can fight with everything to discharge all the hatred they have inside themselves. Later, when leaving the infirmary, Soji meets Asaki and remembers when he invoked his flames, asking his teacher to teach him. Thus time passes, and we see Class 1B doing their best in training, just like the group from Class 1A, except Namika, who seems to be only looking at men on her cell phone, and Shina, who only likes to show off in the footbath meeting. The director is anxious to witness the battle between A and B. In the previous combat, those from Class B received a beating, and the only one who did well was Kasubata. But this time they count on Soji, and that might change their destiny. The detail is that it is unknown whether it will be for better or for worse. Elsewhere, we see a hooded figure at a fountain sending a message to the Lonely One, announcing that very soon his desire will become reality, and that he is very excited. The next day, the group is on their way to where the combat will take place. Imoto is quite nervous because in the previous combat, they would not stop chasing him. Soji feels sorry and asks why he is so afraid. When he is about to explain further, Heijima interrupts them and says that is enough, that everyone has their own reasons. And Urusagawa observes and comments to her master that it is a shame her true self cannot be present. But Kiyomi Urusagawa reveals that in reality she is hidden inside the box behind them, and mentions that it had been a long time since she left the boarding school. But when she is closer to the doll, it consumes less spiritual power, which will be necessary for them to win. They finally arrive at the destination and are surprised to see that they have returned to Kusatsu. They ask why they returned to the school, and it is revealed that this time they are going to have an urban battle in the town of Kusatsu. Since the infirmary is located in this place, getting injured is permitted, but killing is forbidden. They are on grounds belonging to the association that recreates Kusatsu perfectly. Upon stepping down from the van, Agari warns that it is time to speak with Professor Asaki, but he does not know how to use a tablet, and is still practically without clothes. He finally gets dressed and tells the students he is sure they will make it, and informs them that everyone will be watching the battle, and that even though it is a school tradition, this time there is an extra factor. They will be evaluated to see if they are useful in the exorcism against the Lonely One. Kasubata replies that they do not intend to embarrass him, but Asaki opens up to them and says he would not mind if they lost, because if they win, it would mean they will have to face an extreme-level exorcism, which might cause them never to return. Even so, he knows they are trying very hard, and as a teacher, he only asks them to win this battle. The advisor warns his class that they need to demonstrate they are superior. Everyone has an objective because individually they are stronger than them. Isurugi asks to fight against Soji, but Shina says he wants to fight against Soji because he likes the color blue. Izurugi recommends that he does not interfere in his romance, and then Agari starts the hunt. Hasumi thanks Soji for getting angry when they were insulted on the mountain and makes it clear that on that day they said nothing because they were saving all the anger for that combat. When the siren sounds, Kasabata gives his war cry. When Agari sees their spiritual power, he warns his group that the fun has begun, but is interrupted by Shina, who says that he will be the one to deal with that mediocre power. When he invokes his spiritual power, he creates a huge ice sculpture of himself. His group comments that he exaggerated a bit and asks how much battery he spent. He replies proudly that it was 50%. Meanwhile, the other group is horrified by the terrible sculpture, but Kasabata orders Emoto to activate his barrier. He activates it very quickly and manages to protect himself from Agari's attack. Soji congratulates him on the excellent work and cannot believe that Agari attacked from so far away. Kasabata explains that Agari is the representative of Class 1A and his spiritual power is the short sword peso, which allows him to choose at will the target and the power of the cut. Despite being in his first year, he has already participated in several high-level exorcisms, besides being a prodigy capable of defeating medium-level spirits alone. Therefore, they know he is dangerous. If they encounter him in a confrontation, they must flee. They move and order Kiyomi Urusagawa to hide her real body well. On the other hand, Class 1A sets out for the hunt and Izurugi is excited looking for Soji. Meanwhile, Agari easily finds Kiyomi Urusagawa's hiding place and congratulates her on leaving her confinement, but says that unfortunately her end has arrived. She flees to save her life, but Agari cuts the box, revealing that inside there was only a doll. Soon we see the plan of Class 1B. They already knew that Class 1A would separate because they are stronger individually. So Kiyomi Urusagawa served as bait. She screams excitedly saying that they fell right into it, and everyone attacks in a stronger group, remembering that exorcism is teamwork. Even so, Agari manages to dodge and block the attacks very easily, saying that they saved him the trouble of looking for them, since now he only needs to finish everyone off. Kasabata asks Renri Hasumi how the others are, and he replies that fortunately they have not been seen yet. They continue working together, and by restricting Agari's movements, Soji manages to land a powerful kick on him. Meanwhile, the director congratulates Group B on the excellent coordination. The advisor is quite frustrated, while the director continues saying that she likes Group B very much and thinks it is very lovely to see her dear Kiyomi Urusagawa moving in that manner. Returning to Agari, he begins to cut all the stickiness off himself, and seeing that he is about to free himself, the group tries to do something, but they achieve absolutely nothing. Agari frees himself and gets very angry because they ruined his flawless victory. He warns that normally he only uses cuts, as he does not usually use his sword to cut humans because it can kill them. But by releasing his powerful cut, he ends up defeating Kiyomi Urusagawa. Her phone turns off and all the surrounding bodies are cut. Emoto turns the volume up to the maximum. Agari wonders how he could let himself be carried away by anger and apologizes to the boys, warning that it is best for them to raise their adrenaline to the maximum, because now he is going to concentrate on cutting their limbs and the shock can kill them. Urusagawa comments that comrade lost control. Now the escape route is blocked. Soji says they do not need to worry because they still rely on Emoto's wall. But upon checking, he notices that Emoto is afraid and the wall no longer exists. Emoto is frustrated for not being able to do anything, while Agari reminds him that he cannot form his wall if he does not concentrate on the music he listens to. Agari says that Emoto has not overcome his fear, has not evolved at all, and will never change the fact that he is a useless coward, recommending that he simply abandon the academy. Emoto begins to cry and takes off his headphone. When he is about to give up, he covers his mouth while Soji and Urusagawa advance against Agari, shouting that he has no right to decide who Emoto is. He wonders why they are doing that, and Renri Hasumi replies that it is because they are companions and will not abandon anyone, since Class 1B is the family that Kasabata and he found. Agari replies that if they are such close friends, then he will dismember them together when he is about to attack them. Everyone disappears. Agari wonders what happened, and soon we see the boys falling scattered all over Kusatsu. Before disappearing, Renri Hasumi reveals that windows are not only meant for looking through them, At the footbath, everyone is shocked to discover that Renri Hasumi's true ability allows him to teleport to the places he photographed. The director comments to Asaki that he had a true hidden treasure, so much so that not even Professor Kakiko knew of its existence. The detail is that now that Class 1A is dispersed, Class 1B has more chances of winning by having the advantage in individual combats. But Asaki thinks of Emoto and changes his expression, while Renri Hasumi warns Agari that he should not underestimate Class 1B again, as this time they will defeat him. Meanwhile, Emoto is terrified and the boys wonder what they should do. Kasabata thinks that Agari is absurdly strong and that he would never be able to beat him in a one-on-one combat, so they gathered again to prepare another ambush. He barely finishes saying this and Agari comes out of one of the windows, telling Kasabata that he cannot stand the existence of Soji, since he has the same power as the Lonely One. Besides not standing exorcists without talent, and especially Kasabata. He says he entered through that window precisely to destroy him. Kasabata charges towards him and says it hurts a lot to hear that from him because he holds no grudge. Agari laughs and tells him to stop and move on, saying he knows that he hates him too. Kasabata begins to fight, throwing hammer blows in every direction, but Agari dodges and comments that the hammer should not be in his hands. In a second, he cuts all of his clothes with his hammer. Kasabata is indignant, since Agari is just playing with him by cutting his clothes and not his body. Agari says that he is a fake, someone who wears a mask of right and wrong, but in reality is just a violent and vulgar man. Kasabata tells him to shut his mouth. When he sees Agari, he remembers the type of people he detests, the type of arrogant and loud people, incapable of admitting errors and weaknesses, who live on the internet telling others what they should do and what is right. Agari delivers a cut and causes intense pain in him, saying that he is nothing but trash, and asks if Kasabata already intends to give up, saying that it is best to stop pretending he can defeat him and wants to know why he does not run away like last time. Kasabata gets even angrier and picks up his hammer again. Meanwhile, Izurugi meets Soji again. He says that this time he is going to torture him, and that he will burn all of his fingers one by one to then make him beg to stop. He even confesses that he is anxious for this moment. But Soji just stares at him. Izurugi asks why he is making that face, and Soji replies that they told him that Izurugi likes to scare and annoy people, so he is simply going to ignore him. Izurugi gets irritated and charges towards him, saying he will take revenge for what he said about his friends. At that moment, Izurugi takes advantage of the situation and says that Agari is fighting against Kasabata and that he can perceive people's fear, as well as their negative emotions. At that time, Agari is making Kasabata die of fear, making him feel inferiority and frustration. But Soji begins to laugh and replies that this will not happen. Back with Kasabata, he charges forward with everything, but Agari sends him into the hot springs and recommends that he surrender once and for all and leave the sacred lake, because even though it is an imitation, he is not permitted to enter there, besides ordering that he set aside this idea of what is right. Kasabata interrupts him and comments that he was on the verge of losing control, but that hot water made him calmer, and now that he is more tranquil, he makes it clear to Agari that he hates him with all his soul and that he is the one who is right. Meanwhile, Renri Hasumi finds Shina, but asks to pretend that they never met because he is at a disadvantage. But he does not intend to let that happen because his teleportation power is quite troublesome. Renri Hasumi is at only 36% battery, while Shina is at 70% and intends to defeat him so that Kasabata can see how incredible he is. He wastes no time and invokes the Glorious One. At the footbath, Namika recognizes that Renri Hasumi's power is impressive, but Shina also has a great talent and a quite rare type of virtual power. Shina says that his maximum level monster is to destroy huge rocks, but feels that he cannot waste time because he needs to reunite with Kasabata. In a flashback, we see that they met at 6 years old. At that time, he introduced his younger brother, Oda, and now looking back he understands that his parents were just betting on their children and their spiritual power. Like many families of exorcists, his was toxic. They almost never let them go out and always tortured them as supposed training for years and years. And whenever he saw his friend Kasabata, he knew that his family did the same. Years later, Renri Hasumi's father was disappointed because neither of his two pathetic sons had awakened spiritual power. Meanwhile, in the other families, they had already awakened. The mother suggested giving electronic devices to channel that power, but the father refused, saying that virtual power was a heresy. Because of this, they went without food and water for 3 days and 3 nights, since according to him, upon reaching the limit, they would awaken the spiritual path. The two brothers observed the moon together, and at a certain point Hoda asked Renri Hasumi to look at his face and never forget it. It was at that moment that Hoda died, and the father did nothing but say that the basic training was too much for his pathetic son, declaring that his birth was a mistake and asking Renri Hasumi not to end up like his brother, and furthermore, to forget that he existed. Everyone in the house stopped mentioning that matter, but Renri Hasumi never forgot him. While he was locked in his room, the bars broke. At that time he found Kasabata, who came to get him so they could run away together. He went to see him because he heard about Hoda and was tired of this cruel world. Renri Hasumi went to his side, fleeing from his horrible family. Since then, they began to live on the streets as delinquents, knowing the world with their own hand. Kasabata dyed his hair so he would not look like an exorcist. After jumping through that window, Renri Hasumi experienced many things for the first time and knew what the real world was. Despite all the good things in the world, he still continued to feel a great emptiness. Upon seeing that he was sad, Kasabata approached to ask what was happening. He panicked, wondering what he should do, since he cannot remember his brother's face. Only 6 months had passed since they fled, and now everything was becoming blurred. He promised to remember him and tries to remember him every day to engrave his image in his memory. But now everything is confused. Kasabata asks his companion to hand him one of her phones. She refuses because she uses it for work, but he pays no attention and factory resets it. After that, he hands over the cell phone and warns that it is for taking photos, because he knows perfectly well that he struggles to remember Hoda. But human memory is not perfect, and both good and bad memories fade with time. But if he takes a photo, he will never be able to forget him. So he asks that he take a photo and stop being such a crybaby. He begins to cry and says that he is going to take thousands of photos for a long time. The first photo was horrible, because besides being blurry, he put his finger on the lens, but it was a very important photo for him. Thus time passed. When Kasabata decided to return to the world of exorcists, he had not even considered going with him. But as long as he is with his family, wherever he is, it will be his home, provided that it is a home without bars on the windows. And thus he took the photo when Soji entered the group. Returning to the present, Shina advances with his monstrous beast, but Renri Hasumi traps him in one of his windows and runs to attack him, because at that moment his family is in danger, and he has no time to lose. After leaving him knocked out, he runs in search of the others while Namika panics upon seeing Shina being taken down. On the other hand, Kiyomi Urusagawa receives Renri Hasumi's message, warning that Kasabata is in danger because he is fighting against Agari. But before going to help him, she is intercepted by Kyukuru Kasabata, who does not intend to allow her to reunite with Kasabata. Kiyomi Urusagawa activates her virtual power and tries to stick chewing gum in her hair. But Kyukuru Kasabata does not intend to ruin her beautiful hairstyle. We discover that Kyukuru Kasabata is a supposedly romantic girl, but in reality she is just a stalker who becomes obsessed with any streamer, investigating what they like and writing to them from fake profiles. After Kyukuru Kasabata investigates everything about the man she likes, she transforms into his ideal woman, and currently she is using her appearance number 12. Her virtual power allows her to obtain 120% of the power of the man she conquers. Upon obtaining this power, she charges towards Kiyomi Urusagawa, while thinking that after conquering a man she ends up getting bored with them. Kyukuru Kasabata reveals that she will not allow her to reunite with Kasabata, because when he is found he will probably be very hurt after the defeat, and if she arrives to help him, perhaps her dear Kasabata will end up falling in love with her, and that she will not allow at all. Kiyomi Urusagawa throws her away with a shot while calling her sick, but Kyukuru Kasabata clings to her and the two go flying together. To cushion the fall, Kiyomi Urusagawa spends too much virtual power, while Kyukuru Kasabata tears and opens her clothes to free herself from the stickiness and attacks using 120% of the power she conquered. She leaves Kiyomi Urusagawa in only her underwear. She becomes embarrassed and covers her body, but ends up lowering her guard. This is the opportunity that Kyukuru Kasabata takes to try to beat her up and leave her unrecognizable so that Kasabata will not feel attracted to her. Kiyomi Urusagawa asks why she likes him so much, and Kyukuru Kasabata confesses that he has a penetrating look, something that drives her crazy just like Soji. who is also quite handsome, and she cannot stand the idea of another person having them. Kiyomi Urusagawa gets irritated and throws her to the ground, saying that she cannot even decide on just one, and reminds her how she was when she entered the academy. But now she dyed her hair black to match Kasabata. She asks if there is anything that really belongs to her. Kyukuru Kasabata remembers how whenever she was with a man, she adopted all their tastes, obviously trying to be the ideal woman, but also remembers that other girls said she changed boyfriends more than underwear. She gets angry and says that everything she says is serious, that she is a sincere girl who speaks everything from the heart, while Kiyomi Urusagawa is nothing but a clingy and obsessive fan. Kiyomi Urusagawa chokes her with her chewing gum and tells her to go to the nether. When she realizes her disadvantage, Kyukuru Kasabata shows a photo revealing that she flirted with her idol. Kiyomi Urusagawa is stunned, and upon loosening her grip, Kyukuru Kasabata smiles and takes advantage of the opportunity. She uses the power of a sumo wrestler and throws her away, thanking her for having ordered that photo edit. Because with this blow now, Urusagawa must be depressed, and to make it worse, she comments that her idol was not even her type. In a memory, we see how the rest of the girls spoke ill of Urusagawa, saying that she thought she was superior just because her family had money, and they wrote on her seat for her to return to the royal palace. Despite all of this, upon hearing her idol on the base, she found strength. She recomposes herself and charges again towards Kusaba, revealing that she already knew that that was an edited photo, because she recognized the photo that her dear idol took alone in bed. She remembers perfectly the year, day, and hour, because she kept looking at it repeatedly, imagining that she was lying with him. Kusaba realizes that Urusagawa is also a psychopath like her. Back to the time when Urusagawa discovered her power, Asaki met with her. Urusagawa sent him away because she was not interested in having a relationship with him. Asaki says that it is not what she thinks and reminds her that the girl ended up in the hospital. She justifies herself, saying that she did not want to do that, but that girl would not stop provoking her. So she wished that she would die, and that ended up happening. She begins to cry, asking for forgiveness. So Asaki uses his spiritual power. He explains that it is a special power that only she and he can see, besides the fact that there are many others like her, and invites her to learn to use this power. Back to the present, Urusagawa says that now it is no longer because of her idol. There are many people who trust her, and she does not intend to lose. Kusaba also does not intend to give up. The two continue to attack each other, and their batteries drop until they reach 1%. But not even that stops the two, as they turn off their spiritual powers and begin to hit each other with bare hands. They beat each other up for real, and, in the end, end up taking off all their clothes and taking a bath to relax. When they make peace, they recognize that each one is strong in their own way, and end up making a toast. Kusaba confesses that, in reality, she has never been with anyone. For now, Class 1B is ahead with 1 victory and 1 draw. Suddenly, a member of the intelligence warns the director that a ghost account has been detected in Kusatsu. Nanso asks Asaki if this is one of his ridiculous surprises, but he says he has nothing to do with it. Nanso comments to the director that they should investigate as soon as possible. The director gives the order to investigate, while Asaki wonders what is happening. Meanwhile, Emoto is unable to stop trembling, while Isurugi is frustrated, seeing how his flames are unable to reach Soji. He asks what he did in the last few weeks. Soon we see when Soji asked Asaki to teach him to use his power without utilizing his phone, but he replies that he cannot do that. Soji gets confused and asks why Isurugi manages to do that. Asaki says that it is still early, but perhaps he is already ready for the next stage. He explains that the normal thing is to release spiritual power through the phone, but it is possible to make it circulate through the body and then redirect it to another part, releasing it in a different way. They go to the training room, where he explains the process, and after a hard training, Soji now manages to release his power with more freedom. Now we see that he has a mount to carry the phone on his abdomen, being able to fight with more freedom. And thanks to the training with his master, he developed defense techniques, and Isurugi is frustrated to see that his attacks do not work, while Soji charges towards him and beats him without mercy. Isurugi enters masochist mode, asking to be struck more and more, and at the right moment grabs Soji's shoulder to attack from close quarters. Soji uses his flames to counter those of Isurugi, warning that it will take a stronger flame to burn him, and suddenly throws him into the lake. Isurugi gets frustrated and comments that that is no longer fun, because now Soji is just someone strong, and he no longer feels hatred. Isurugi remembers that when he was younger, he was a rebel who used to pick on girls, and they looked at him like a disgusting brat. Love and hatred are strong emotions, and he receives a lot of hatred on the internet, and the only regret is not being able to see the faces of those who hate him. The masochist satisfies himself the more hatred he receives and asks for Soji to attack him with hatred, reminding him that it was he who burned the brooch of his deceased sister, wanting to be beaten with anger to satisfy himself. But Soji replies that he has no time to lose, and Isurugi enters panic upon seeing his indifference. Soji uses his special technique, jumping very high to fall in free fall and attack with his lightning, and Isurugi enters panic. After that, Agari still has 58% battery, while Kasabata is at 17%. At that time, Renri Hasumi arrives to fight in a 2 against 1. But out of nowhere, Renri Hasumi stabs Kasabata in the back. He cannot understand it, but recalls that Kasabata had warned the others that there is a member of Class 1A whose power is unknown because he did not participate in the previous tournament, and that if they encounter him, they must be careful. Now we see that Renri Hasumi encountered him and fell under his virtual power, which is hypnosis. He likes to spread false news and make ignorant people believe in his lies, and if a target sees his screen, he manages to make them obey his orders. After stabbing Kasabata, Renri Hasumi panics upon realizing that he attacked his friend. Meanwhile, Namaka warns Agari that those two have already been defeated. Agari complains because he did not want it to end that way, but there is not much to do anymore. So it is time to go after the little doll and the hidden coward. Kasabata stands up because it is not over yet. Even so, Namaka goes forward to hypnotize him, ordering him to dance until death. Suddenly, Kasabata shouts and manages to disrupt Namaka's concentration, causing Namaka himself to start dancing. Agari explains that an imperfect ability ends up backfiring on the user themselves, and seeing that Kasabata still has a little life left, he prepares to continue the combat, warning that if he cannot defeat him, he will amputate his limbs, and he will be incapacitated to fight. Renri Hasumi begs Kasabata to surrender once and for all because he does not want him to die, and begins to shout for Professor Asaki to remove Kasabata from the combat. Asaki looks worried, while the other teachers ask if he intends to kill the student. Kasabata tells everyone to shut up because he is not going to lose to that big glasses idiot, and by digitalizing his spiritual power, he invokes a new weapon that leaves everyone surprised. Agari is perplexed to see that Kasabata's mallet is emitting flames, and he thinks that he hates instigating people very much, especially because they always leave everything in suspense. Then a memory arises showing that Hoda's death was nothing more than an excuse, since he wanted to flee from those harsh training days and took advantage of that to escape with his friend. He just wanted to have fun and release repressed feelings, until one day Asaki appeared and invited them to the Exorcist Academy. Kasabata refused without thinking twice, while the others began to mock Asaki, who insisted on taking them because he did not want to lose two great talents along with the bullies. Seeing that Asaki ignored him, he charges towards him, but is defeated. Kasabata advises them not to do anything stupid, because even attacking in a group, they would not be able to defeat him. Renri Hasumi cannot believe that the famous Asaki went to recruit them personally, while Asaki notices that Kasabata had a demon tattooed on his arm and asks if that was his way of saying he would never be an exorcist. He calls him a lovely youth and reveals that in Buddhism snakes are considered good. But at that moment they are interrupted by the girls, who looking closer at Asaki say that despite being a monk he is handsome, and end up dragging him to the bar, while Asaki shouts to the boys not to hesitate to call him, and comments to Kasabata that his mother wants to see him. Soon we see that his only regret was leaving his mother behind, the only person in the house who was kind to him. Sometime later, Renri Hasumi receives the news that Kasabata's mother died, so they go to the funeral, where a man with a mustache asks Kasabata what he is doing there. For a moment he thinks that nothing anyone said to him would affect him, but when the man shows a video of him making a scandal, he says that his mother died because of him, calling him a dishonor and a shame to the mayonnaise family. According to him, when his mother saw that video, she was consumed by shame until she passed away. Renri Hasumi tries to intervene, but Kasabata interferes and is shaken by the news, deciding to leave. He understands that the man with the mustache just wanted to blame someone, but the simple possibility of that being true torments him deeply, since his mother only wanted him to be a good man, even if he were not an exorcist. Sometime later, they join the academy, where they were very well received by Asaki, who asks Kasabata what led him to return to the world he hated so much, wanting to know if it was to ask forgiveness from his mother for what he did or simply to punish himself. Renri Hasumi replies that he has no idea, he just wanted to do things right. Since then, Kasabata adopted the surname Kasabata, his mother's maiden name. From that point on, he started to follow a routine of taming instigators on the internet, so that those idiots would realize how idiotic they were and stop. But in reality, he did that as a form of self-punishment to end his own stupidity, and the reason he hates incendiary instigators is because he is also one of them. Back to the present, Agari says that this reflects his true nature, so he is going to cut his arm and keep that mallet. He blocks the attack, surprising everyone. Agari grows desperate and continues attacking, while Kasubata continues blocking. This leaves Agari even more confused, wondering why this is happening, since he is someone who strived so hard and cannot lose. Kasubata thinks that he is right. Unlike him, Agari never ran away. He, on the other hand, did run away, which is why he could never win. He does not understand why he is so desperate, until he notices Soji flying through the skies and understands that he did not run away from his incendiary nature, but rather managed to transform his flames into power. He remembers the time he complained to Asaki, asking why he had to train Soji, and Asaki replied that it would be the best not only for Soji, but also for him. Currently, he has difficulty admitting it, but if he does not give up now, it was because of Soji. Agari recommends not claiming victory because he still remains a coward who ran away and has now returned with his tail between his legs. He thinks about attacking him with his ultimate cut, while Kasubata agrees that he ran away. But running away is not the end. He is quite different, and the past he wanted to erase is what led him to become the man he is. And he charges forward with all his strength, hammering Agari from all sides, taking opportunities to have fun and insult them in the process. He finally manages to knock out Agari. When Soji sees his companion's victory, he gets even more excited, taking the opportunity to quickly finish off Izurugi. Kasubata remembers that he cannot forget his will to do what is right, so he apologizes to Agari for using such vulgar language, while Izurugi accepts defeat and asks Soji to kill him, because now he has no hatred for Soji, and Agari is going to abandon him. Soji wonders what he should do with a masochist, so he has the idea to order him to apologize for having burned his sister's past. Izurugi apologizes and Soji assumes he can forgive him, so he warns that if he speaks ill of them again, he will be happy to kill him, causing Izurugi to regain the motivation of being hated. While meanwhile Namaka panics upon seeing that his team is losing. In the meantime, the exorcists who are in the examination area detect that the dead account signal is getting stronger, so it is time to go check on that. Returning to Soji, he reunites with the group and congratulates them for having won. But Kasubata replies that it was actually a draw, since they cannot fight because their batteries are at the minimum. Soji asks how he can say that when they left Agari in that state. Furthermore, he is certain that they won. At that moment, Renri Hasumi embraces him and thanks him. Soji does not understand what he is referring to, since he only told the truth, but Renri Hasumi says he will explain later, and that it was he who managed to open that which Kasubata kept closed for so long. He thanks him very much and reveals that even including himself, currently 5 of Class 1A are out of combat and 3 of Class 1B, which means that now they only need to defeat Shina. Soji asks what that fellow is like, and Renri Hasumi comments that it could be said that he considers himself a work of art. He keeps showing off on social networks, and the moderators freeze his account all the time. For that reason, his virtual power is of the freezing type, and even though he is an idiot, he is quite intriguing. Soji thinks it will be a battle of cold against heat, which will be quite interesting. And Kasubata comments that he must have spent a lot of spiritual power with the sculpture he made at the beginning, so now he should not be a rival for him. Soji sets out to look for him, while Shina understands that now he is the only one left standing, and upon activating his exhibitionist mode begins to take photos to upload to social networks, claiming that it is idiotic to freeze his accounts because it is not a sin to be so beautiful. The losers who are in the infirmary are watching the competition, and the members of Class 1 comment that even though he is at a disadvantage, Shina's power is enough to win. Everyone agrees that he is quite powerful even though he is an idiot. Renri Hasumi, Kasubata, and the deformed Agari arrive at the infirmary. Soji continues looking for Shina, thinking that he needs to give his best because his team strived to bring him this far, and he must repay that. At the footbath, Namaka is annoyed because he cannot accept that Class 1 loses, and he especially cannot accept Soji because he injured his brother with the will-o'-the-wisp, so he replies that he knows this perfectly well, remembering that his brother was his best friend. The intelligence arrives to inform everyone that the weak signal they had detected from the ghost account is now increasing greatly. Asaki asks about the exorcists who were investigating, and the intelligence comments that they lost communication with them, which leaves everyone very worried. And now back with the mission, Soji finally finds Sheena and warns that it is time to end everything. But when the mist dissipates, Sheena asks him to observe his new work of art. Soji asks why he froze the staff monks. He is horrified to see that the monks are dead, and, as if that were not enough, he is disappointed with his work of art and decides to destroy it. Soji panics, warning that the fight no longer matters, but Sheena replies that it has only begun. His eyes are bleeding, and he remembers what happened to his sister and starts screaming that he does not want to be frozen again, revealing that he waited a long time for this and wants to get an account that cannot be frozen, a body that does not age or die, and also wings. Zack understands that the signal was coming from Sheena's account, who was already dead and now is the false account. Soji asks what all of this means and asks him to admire his beautiful body and what he can do now. He freezes the entire place, including his own real body, and feels very grateful to the Lonely One and Soji, asking if by any chance he transformed him into a dead account. The blizzard covers the entire place, and now nobody can enter or leave. Soon we see how Emoto continues sitting in the same place, and the assistant of the Lonely One comments that he seems quite satisfied. The Lonely One replies that the idea of his dream finally becoming reality leaves him very moved, and his assistant understands that Soji has something important for him. Nanso cannot understand how they murdered one of his students, while Zack corrects him, showing that the Lonely One did not transform him. It was Sheena who wanted this, and Kakiko informs Zack that unfortunately they cannot enter the fake Kusatsu because the barrier is powerful, which might mean that a high-level false account is inside. Soji clarifies to Sheena that they had already said he was an idiot, but not of that level. Sheena replies that he is going to kill him to transform him into an artistic offering for his lord, the Lonely One. Soji charges towards him, determined to exorcise him, but he dodges and praises him for being a great advancement despite being human, and then shows a new example of what he can do now. Sheena attacks with his ice power, and a large number of hands begin to trap him. When he speeds up at high velocity, Soji frees himself and says that his flames are much more effective against dead accounts, and that having become a ghost was his worst mistake against him. Sheena dodges and says that even if his flames are stronger against ghosts, first he will have to touch him, and uses his illusion, creating more images of himself to make Soji hypnotized by his beauty. He keeps showing off his own beauty while giving Soji a beating. In a memory, we see Sheena thrilled because the new account he created has already surpassed 8,000 followers. He feels that his beauty needs to be seen by the entire world, but there is something he cannot control, which is the passage of time. With each second that passes he grows older, and his beauty should be eternal and frozen in time. At that moment, another of his accounts is suspended. At the academy, while Class 1 poses for a group photo, Sheena appears showing off his legs. The photographer comments that he is not the protagonist, and the rest of the boys wonder why they need to have him in the group. Agari asks Nanso if he is sure he wants to have him in his class. He replies that his judgment is impeccable, and that one day they will understand. And yes, time went passing by and they carried out group missions, where Sheena, when he saw dead people, understood that his beauty sooner or later would end because he would grow old. This thought did not leave his mind, reflecting that humans cannot escape the passage of time. No matter how beautiful someone is, time will age and rot everything. Each time he felt more fear. He stayed on social networks wondering why this was and what the meaning of this was if it is not forever, until a user commented that they wished his beauty were eternal. That person was the Lonely One, and he remembers how his teacher said that evil always tempts humanity and that if the Lonely One sent a private message they should report him. But seeing that the Lonely One was the only one who understood him and wanted his beauty to be eternal and his body immortal, he decided to hide this and kept the contact with him all the time through the cell phone. Thus time passed, and a day before the tournament of A vs B was when the Lonely One met with him, guaranteeing that they would never have his account frozen again, and seeking to maintain his eternal beauty. On the day of the tournament, after creating his sculpture, he starts chasing them and ends up being killed and transformed into a dead account. Back to the present, he asks Soji to stand up at once, since he knows his body is wrapped in a layer of will-o'-the-wisp fire to avoid being frozen by the blizzard. He recognizes that it is a good strategy, but this is going to consume his battery, and states that before starting the tournament he used his power to create that beautiful sculpture. And Agari fought with him, saying that his weak point was running out of battery very quickly. But now it is different because he will never run out of battery again, and his abilities are also more powerful. Soji recognizes that he was impressed by the power, but the art he creates now is nothing but a piece of ice trash. However, none of this shakes Sheena's self-esteem. The boys continue watching the battle and are surprised when Sheena says he will end the combat quickly so he can then kill the rest of the first-year student. Agari gets frustrated upon seeing that his former companion became a false account by his own choice, while Renri Hasumi warns that Sheena is now their enemy and needs to be exorcised, showing that he was following the group. He knows this because the intelligence is monitoring his followers, which means he must have started following him a short time ago. Sheena prepared everything in advance, trapping them in that place to kill everyone. His heart was already corrupted, so now they need to finish him off. The detail is that everyone is out of battery. Agari still has a little, but his mascots do not like the cold. Namika recommends that they remove the batteries, but now is not the right moment. So the group has no other choice but to trust Soji, who asks Sheena if he also intends to kill those who used to be his friends. Sheena replies that he never had friends there, because art is a lonely path. His companions are disappointed by the answer, while Soji charges towards him again. But Sheena dodges and creates a deadly ice curtain, freezing Soji's ability. The group cannot believe that he managed to nullify Soji's ability, since his will-o'-the-wisp destroys dead accounts. Kukuru Kasubata realizes that this ability is an improved version of the normal ice curtain. Soji counterattacks, but Sheena traps him with his ice chain and hurls him repeatedly against the ground. Agari understands that Sheena is using the techniques they perfected together. Finally, he throws him with force against the ground, but Soji stands up and says he feels neither pain nor cold, and is not going to be defeated by an idiot who abandoned his friends. He ignites his flames, but they go out. The group worries, thinking he ran out of spiritual energy, but Renri Hasumi explains that his phone turned off because of the low temperature. Without being able to use his catalyst, Soji becomes unable to move and his body begins to freeze. Sheena prepares to kill him once and for all and launches a huge boulder of ice. And when all seemed lost, Emoto appears, covering Soji with his divine barrier and apologizing for arriving late, saying that he was afraid. He comments that everything became a mess while he was hidden, and Sheena continues attacking with ice. Emoto gets a little nervous. He tells Soji not to worry, because inside the barrier they cannot be frozen, but recommends that he warm himself up so he can fight. Soji embraces him in gratitude and soon tries to warm his phone. Sheena asks Emoto how much longer he will endure, calling him a coward. This makes Emoto imagine what is going to happen. Even though he is scared, he tries to concentrate. Soji notices this while Emoto does his best to maintain focus. Sheena says that humanity also has works of art and trash, and in his case, everything is something mundane. Emoto remembers that he hates loud sounds because his parents did nothing else but fight. When he was a child, he used to cover his ears so that the loud sounds would not reach him. One day while he was walking through the streets, a failed musician who was next to his house gave him headphones, since he knew perfectly well that his parents lived fighting, even though the device had only one old music album, using it to manage to drown out the loud noise he hated so much. This was his refuge. Time passed until one day Asaki and Kakiko arrived at his house, where they saw that his parents were stuck against the wall and Emoto was paralyzed, without strength in a corner, almost fainting. Asaki is surprised by the great size of the barrier and asks the parents if they did something to the boy, but they say they never touched him. Kakiko asks if they should wait for him to run out of energy. Asaki replies that it is not necessary, because the little one no longer has strength, and it is visible that his parents never did anything with him. When he crosses the barrier using his own strength, he takes off Emoto's headphones and says that now everything is fine. Upon managing to move, the parents call him a monster, but Asaki tells them to shut their mouths after seeing their expression and carries Emoto, asking him to accompany them to a place where he can make use of his talent. Kakiko becomes responsible for filing the report of child abuse, and since then Emoto started living with Asaki, who became his father figure and taught him to use his powers. The bleached hair, the piercings, all of that was temporary, because he still continues to hate loud sounds and pain. Thus time passed, and on his birthday Asaki gave him a better pair of headphones. Emoto took the opportunity to say that even though they had already told him not to pressure himself, he decided to enter the Miden Academy. But every day he thinks he was not made for this. He remembers that on the way to the competition, Soji had asked why he wanted to be an exorcist, and the reason is because he failed to give back anything of what Asaki did for him, and wants to become the most incredible exorcist so that his teacher can be proud of him. Thanks to the headphones his teacher gave him, not a single external sound interferes with his concentration. He catches Emoto activating his power towards Sheena. The barrier remains active, but Soji only has 9% battery. Upon reaching Shina, Emoto opens the barrier. Soji thinks that Emoto, despite being fearful, showed courage and did all of that to get there, and as his companion, he must end this fight to repay him, and with a powerful blow strikes Shina. But he says that what he hit was only a sculpture, and Soji is exposed to a direct attack. Shina takes advantage of the moment to finish him off, but at the last instant Kiyomi Urusagawa arrives, managing to block his attack. Soji's cell phone finally turns on, and the two classes join in the battle. Soji asks what they are doing there if they have no battery, but Kasabata replies that they slept a little bit to recover, and it was just about 10 very good minutes thanks to dynamic hypnosis. Shina thanks them for having gone there, because that way he saved himself the trouble of going to look for them. He charges towards them with his deadly feathers, but Emoto protects them, and Renri Hasumi says that his courage gave them the 10 minutes they needed to recover, and that from now on nobody else will call him a coward. Agari kneels before Class B, recognizing that they were destroyed in the fight and that one of their companions ended up yielding to evil and became a murderer. He shames himself and asks to fight alongside them. Soji accepts with pleasure. Now this exorcism is a mission for the entire first year, which means they form an alliance between A and B to exorcise that idiot. Meanwhile, Heijima is climbing an ice mountain. She is looking for something. The classes prepare themselves and Shina makes his invocation. Now we discover why Shina is so obsessed with Kasabata. He was also a victim of her conquests. Kasabata uses her power and also makes invocations. Soji also wants to participate, but Kasabata stops him because he does not have much energy and recommends that he turn off his will-o'-the-wisp fire barrier to save energy to deliver a powerful blow to that long-haired guy. Soji accepts and Isurugi takes charge of warming him up. He does this with pleasure, saying he is crazy to get burned, but needs to contain himself, and that is an extraordinary feeling. The boys are flying on Shina's invocations, but Shina mocks them and says those invocations have pathetic wings, and shows his own majestic wings that serve as swords, arrows, and even shields, attacking them. Namaka asks Renri Hasumi what he can do to help. But Renri Hasumi asks her not to speak to him because he still has not forgiven her and uses one of his windows to warm Kiyomi Urusagawa with hot springs. Namaka does not want to stand still and begins to dance to cheer them up, but Emoto asks her to stop doing foolish things because it is disrupting his concentration. Kasabata leaps from the invocation and charges towards Shina. Renri Hasumi saying that this transformed him into a perfect target, but he did not count on Agari deflecting his attacks, allowing Kasabata to get close enough. He advances directly against Shina, and at that moment Agari appears behind his back, and the two attack together, managing to cut off one of his wings. Hina gets very irritated and asks how they dare touch his majesty. Agari does not stop attacking because he is very irritated and reveals to Shina that he always liked him because he had a great talent and his obsession with aesthetics was even stronger than his own, and for that reason he cannot forgive his betrayal. Shina defends himself and says he should understand his art better than anyone, but Kasabata interferes and shouts to Soji that he will only have one chance to digitalize his power and cannot waste it. When the boys charge towards Shina, unfortunately the invocation disappears and Kasabata runs out of battery. She panics upon seeing that they failed. At that moment, Isurugi leaps from the invocation, grabs Shina, and begins to burn his wings, revealing that he always detested him because every time he saw him, he said his red color was vulgar. Shina strikes his shoulder, but Isurugi smiles with pleasure and says that now his beautiful body is stained with his vulgar red. Shina becomes disgusted and Isurugi takes advantage of the distraction to melt one of his wings as he falls. He says that now he understands why he betrayed them. He simply did it happily, but now he is going to the ice sky. And at that time Soji appears behind Shina and digitalizes his power. The detail is that Kiyomi Urusagawa still immobilizes him with her stickiness, but even so, he cannot waste the chance and advances. Shina uses his ability and traps him in a blizzard. Soji begins to freeze while regretting having rushed. While freezing, he remembers that he trained to become stronger, but still remains weak. Even with all the help from his companions, lamenting for not being able to do anything. The statue that Sheena had created begins to move, and he himself is surprised to see that his beautiful sculpture gained life, but is shocked to discover that it is Hiyori Hajime who is controlling it. She says that as long as it has a human form, it is a puppet, and that she had never controlled something so large, which is why her spiritual power is being drained very quickly. Even so, she gets excited and tries to attack a statue, or at least that was the intention, because the statue ends up collapsing, and she already expected that. After all, it was an ice sculpture. This scares Sheena, and this moment of distraction allows Kiyomi Urusagawa to trap him with her stickiness. Soji takes advantage of the moment, and with his last seconds advances at high velocity towards Sheena, thanking all of his friends whom Sheena abandoned for having allowed him to get this far. He begins to deliver a sequence of punches, and his power proves to be quite effective. But Sheena has not been exercised yet, and Soji's battery is at the limit. He cannot faint, so he turns off his spiritual power and lands on Kiyomi Urusagawa's sticky substance. Emoto embraces him and says he was incredible, but Soji replies that it is not finished yet. Kasabata asks him to watch, saying that it is almost over, while Sheena does not want to surrender and searches for his phone. Soji tries to stop him, but Kasabata restrains him and says they need to finish that. Agari tells Sheena that he looks horrible and orders him to reveal everything he knows about the Lonely One. But Sheena replies that they will never manage to eliminate him, because the Lonely One promised him that he would realize his dream and take him to the Promised Land. Upon revealing this, the Lonely One smiles and activates his will-o'-the-wisp fire against him. At first, Sheena feels the power and thinks he is blessing him, but begins to feel as if he is being burned. The pain consumes him, and seeing that he is disappearing, he says he does not want to vanish. But Agari eliminates him once and for all and says that nobody else will ever be able to see him and his social networks will be deleted. He gets irritated because supposedly he should still live. Sheena says that there are photos of him on the cell phone and that he will always remember whenever he looks at them. And even saying he had no friends, that does not matter to him, because he is still a member of Class 1A. Before disappearing, he remembers everything he went through with his companions and reveals that the objective of the Lonely One is the land of the dead accounts, apologizing to everyone for what he did. Sheena begins to cry as he disappears, but Agari stands very determined and orders him to stop, saying that they only exercised a dead account and that is their job. Soji observes and understands his great determination. Sometime later, the blizzard calms down. Everyone recovers in the infirmary. A helicopter arrives at the location and Soji and Asaki descend to greet them happily. But the students are not in a very good mood and ask why they are so cheerful, since a student just died, calling that a bad joke and ordering them to return to the school. When they return, they are received with joy. Asaki tells Soji that the next day they will evaluate his performance in combat, but for now they are going to enjoy a great banquet. Soji replies that he is not in the mood for parties, but Asaki explains that, as it is a tradition of the Exorcist Association, when someone dies on a mission, they throw a great banquet, because in this line of work people die all the time. And there is nothing better than celebrating with food those who survived and making a toast for those who died. The third-year students observe the boys and comment that they are quite impressive because they defeated a high-level ghost, who moreover was a companion. Nanso meets with Soji and says that now the school was divided about accepting him and his will-o'-the-wisp fire, and confesses that he was the leader of the opponents. But now everyone could see how he fought on that day, and nobody will deny his right to be there anymore, so he apologizes. Soji replies that it is not necessary, but Nanso thanks him for having freed Sheena. When he leaves, Soji notices Nanso reuniting with Agari, who is sad and frustrated by Sheena's death. Elsewhere, we see the Lonely One finding a victim, but now he went too far with her, since he is irritated by the loss of Sheena, who should have become a very strong dead account. Sad boy K regrets having to remember something so sad and curses Sheena for having given hope to his master and then broken his heart. Besides having revealed his plan, the Lonely One replies that at least Sheena still served for something, since he can see how Soji became stronger, and they are closer and closer to achieving their goal and creating the land of dead accounts. while the boys are in the hot springs and explain to Soji that after exorcising a ghost, they bathe in the hot springs, as it is an academy tradition to purify the body after purifying spirits. Soji understands perfectly. The only confusing thing is why there are also girls in the bath. Kyukuru Kasabata explains that it is to strengthen bonds, since they would be alone if they were only among themselves. Kiyomi Urusagawa tells Soji that he is just a pervert, since they should use mixed baths if they are not naked. Kiyomi Urusagawa was against it, but after being accused of being ashamed, she ended up accepting, and Izurugi tells her to shut her mouth, saying that the hot spring is a sanctuary for men to bathe naked altogether, and if they do not want to see that, they should leave. Agari and Soji glare at him and tell him not to cross the line, but since he likes to be despised, he runs off excited. Kyukuru Kasabata takes advantage of the situation to tell Soji that she is a bit silly and offers herself completely to him. But Shina intervenes and tells her not to exaggerate. Agari takes advantage of the moment to apologize to Emoto for calling him a coward. He gets embarrassed, but pretends to be very confident, saying that he finally sees how great he is. Agari also apologizes to Renri Hasumi, saying that he did not expect him to have such a strong card up his sleeve. Kiyomi Urusagawa asks why he hid this from them too, and Renri Hasumi replies that he did not trust them, but asks them not to worry since this is something personal, not trusting anyone besides Kasabata and Asaki, or at least in the beginning it was like that. But that changed throughout the fight, since while they were fighting, he was thinking of Class B. The boys confess that they thought the same, except Kasabata, who tries to act tough. Renri Hasumi asks him not to lie, since as the representative he was very worried about everyone, and made it very clear that Soji gave him energy. At that moment, Hiyori Heijima comes running and speaks without shame, making it clear to everyone that obviously she thought of them, otherwise she would not have done something that caused her so much fear. Agari observes and comments that they are great companions, and that Class 1 will have to start over from scratch because Shina left a great void. It is quite possible that they will not be able to participate in the exorcism of the Lonely One, but they must continue giving their best. Soji interrupts him and says they would not have defeated Shina without everyone who was present, and that the most correct thing to say would be that it was a victory for everyone in the first year. The boys ask if he is an idiot for wanting to share a great victory like that. Agari does not accept this, because defeat is defeat. Soji smiles and says to his sister in his mind that he finally got friends and that they are incredible people. He now is no longer alone and is going to continue moving forward. The Lonely One is no longer just the guy who killed her, and he intends to become stronger until he finishes him off. The director and her group are analyzing Shina's blood, and we see that the Lonely One has more and more ghosts under his control, and that it is only a matter of time before the war begins. And thus the anime ends. Do not forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment cell phone.